So this is your one and only meeting that you won't have to make any decisions. And hopefully I won't be throwing any surprises at you. So the way I like to start this really is just to start at the beginning with town government, just to give you a sense of how you fit into town government, and maybe give you some talking points if you go out to an Association of Town Finance Committee meeting or something like that. You might understand the differences between towns and finance committees. So I think the most important thing is that the organizational structure of a town really depends upon what statutes it's operating under or whether or not it has a charter. And it can vary from town to town. We have a board of selectmen, a town manager, and the town manager here is actually the chief executive officer of the town, which is different than most communities that have a town manager. In most communities, the town manager is the chief administrative officer, not the chief executive officer. In many communities, the select board is the chief executive officer. And so the reason that is somewhat significant is the chief executive officer makes decisions about lawsuits, whether we're pursuing, and I'm mentioning that because that's timely. It's not, in other towns that would be a matter for the select board, and it's not that the town manager is going off on his or her own in doing that, but at the end of the day, the decision is with the town manager. And a lot of it, the rest of it really has to do with statutes and how we relate to the state, where grants and things like that are signed by the chief executive, and so here it's the town manager. Another interesting point is for health insurance. There are certain health insurance decisions that are made locally, and they're made by the chief executive. So they're made by the town manager and not the select board, and that is a little different as well.
Does that pertain to the schools as well?
So the town manager is the chief executive officer for the town, so that does encompass the schools, but to the extent that we're talking about the administrative function, the town manager obviously has no oversight or authority over the school committee function. But for employees and for health insurance decisions, the town manager is able to participate in contract negotiations at the school level as well.
So the CEO is responsible for the town employees.
Town employees, then health insurance for all town employees.
But that's also negotiated in their contracts or not?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. But there are certain health insurance decisions that are up to the health insurance authority in the town. So, as I mentioned, some towns are just operating under Mass General Law, and there's three laws that really pertain to the structure of governments, and I have them listed. That's not something we get into at the Finance Committee level, but then towns may also, like we do. If you have a charter adopted, then the charter is a statute. It's a statute of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and it's particular to the structure of town government in Concord. So it supersedes many of these statutes that are out there just for general purposes for any community that hasn't decided to sort of refine its own structure. And then there are bylaws, which are of a lower, from a legal perspective, a lower authority. Bylaws are adopted by the town, but then bylaws can also further add or color the charter in the way that the organization operates. And I just mentioned that we have our charter was adopted in 1952, so it's not new, has not been changed all that much in that time. In the handout, I'm not going to go through that, but there is an organizational chart, and the first page shows the outward-facing organizational chart, where we have citizens that elect our select board, the town moderator, the school committee, and you can see where the town manager is appointed by the select board. The town manager here, because he is the chief executive officer, he appoints a lot of board and committee members. Not this board, this committee is appointed by the moderator, but that's another difference that you don't typically see, that you typically see the select board making a lot of board and committee appointments when they're the chief executive officer. And then on the flip side is really the internal facing organization of the town. And this shows, again, the town manager at the top, all of the different departments we have, and the reporting structure that goes along with that.
There's nothing to the agenda. I mean, you're welcome to it, but there's nothing to it.
So then if we look next to the Finance Committee, so you are appointed by the moderator. You're all appointed for a 3-year term. You are allowed to do 2 3-year terms on the Finance Committee before you get booted and land on another committee, hopefully, which a lot of people do. So the basis of authority for the Finance Committee really comes from 3 different places. So in Mass General Law, there is mention of the Finance Committee, and basically what it says, I think the most important thing, is that every town essentially has to have a Finance Committee. In some towns, the Finance Committee is called the Appropriations Committee. So if you're at an Association of Town Finance Committee meeting and you run into somebody in Arlington, you might hear them talk about the Appropriations Committee, and they're doing the same work that you're doing. State law also says that the committee must present a budget to town meeting. And the reason that I have present underlined is we have, through our charter and bylaws, we have adopted a process that's more specific. So you do present it, you present your Finance Committee report, you're making recommendations on the budget and all of the financial articles, but you're not actually standing up at the microphone and presenting the budget, which you might see a Finance Committee member do in some other town, typically smaller towns. And then state law also talks about the authority that you have with the reserve fund and the year-end transfers, which you're very familiar with, and I'll touch on that a little bit more. But then we have the town charter, like I mentioned, and the town charter says that the moderator will appoint the Finance Committee. So that's the sort of the one clarification. State law doesn't say the moderator appoints it, but the charter says the moderator makes your appointments. And then we have a bylaw, which is Article 8 of the 1921 annual town meeting, that establishes the committee. It probably didn't need to do that because state law requires that we have a committee. It talks about the appointment of members. It establishes the requirement for Finance Committee to make recommendations on warrant articles and disposition of property, which is a financial article. And it talks about the fact that you need to have your recommendations printed and mailed.
Carrie, can I ask, do you know which of these 3 addresses the fact that a Finance Committee member can't be a member of another committee?
That is charter. That's in the charter, and that's very typical.
Is it? Okay.
In communities that the Finance Committee, when you're on the Finance Committee, that's really your sole focus for the time that you're appointed. So then, as Finance Committee members, you have a lot of duties, as you know. Some of the duties, I've separated them into 2 categories. Some are general, and most of them are related to budget. So in terms of your general duties, the statute says that you advise town meeting on financial articles, that you take up reserve fund transfers and either approve or disapprove. The statute also says that you authorize snow and ice deficit spending. You don't do that anymore because that was updated in the Modernization Act of 2016. I'd like to keep it in there because if you went and you said, I'm going to check to make sure she knew what she was talking about, you'll see in Mass General Law, you'll see that you're supposed to do that. But if you look at the Municipal Modernization Act, that is done on an administrative basis now. And then the year-end transfers. And then our local regulations also give you you either give approval or disapproval to the selectmen for the exemption of certain purchases or contracts, again, superseded by Mass General Law. So when I talked about you have a bylaw from 1921 that hasn't been updated, Mass General Law has updated that. So you're not involved in procurement anymore. That you cooperate in preparing and periodically updating.
Is there a reason why the bylaw hasn't been updated to reflect the statute?
No. It's something that certainly could be done. I think it was just probably nobody even thought about it.
Wouldn't require a lot of effort, would it?
No, it just would need to be updated and go to town
In
meeting.
essence, you're not drafting new language. You're
Yeah,
just whole set of substitute.
yeah.
Pretty perfunctory, right?
I would think so.
I think that it's part of the problem when you're putting things in a locally adopted document and you're just referencing, you do this in Mass General Law and you do this in Mass General Law. It doesn't, not necessarily how I would put something together today, but it's not uncommon to see references in local bylaws to state law. So again, you have involvement in working on updating comprehensive documents. And so you had some involvement in the comprehensive long-range plan. If we developed a capital planning document, you would have some sort of involvement, and we would have to figure out how that actually happens. You're supposed to be representing the town at the Association of Town Finance Committees. That's a statewide organization. And then the guidelines. And so this is interesting. It says that the chair shall appoint a guidelines subcommittee each year consisting of at least 5 members. For the time that I've been here, the chair hasn't, I don't recall an official vote to appoint a subcommittee. The full finance committee really has served as the subcommittee, but it's not a requirement. As a finance committee member, you are not required to be a member of the guidelines subcommittee, but you probably will find that it's very helpful to attend as many of those meetings as you can, because that's where we're doing a lot of work related to the budget.
And that's like 4 meetings in October. Is that right, Mary?
Yeah.
Yeah, 4 more. Yeah, so
November.
that's heavy.
It's a lot,
But that is where we do a lot of the discussion, yeah.
Are there any statutory guidelines for the guidelines? I know it's a little recursive, but
So the guidelines process is specific to Concord.
okay.
It's not a process that is required under Mass General Law. It's not even a process that I've followed in any other community that I've worked in Massachusetts. It's very specific. So probably 2 years ago, the finance committee, some members of the finance committee get really frustrated because that was the first year that the budgets came in, and there was a real tension, I think, between the finance committee and both the town manager and the school superintendent about coming to an agreement. And several members got really frustrated and I think felt, throw your hands up. What are we doing here? We're coming to all of these meetings, and what are we doing? But to me, having worked in other communities, the finance committee, I haven't seen the finance committee have the authority to set a budget guideline. It's the finance committee, in my past experience, reviewed the budgets and made a decision whether or not they thought that they were reasonable and presented that to town meeting. Now, what is different here is we do have excess levy capacity. So in Massachusetts, you can only raise property taxes 2.5% without specific voter authority. In Concord, we're very fortunate that we have excess levy capacity. So the town can raise taxes within Proposition 2.5, above 2.5%. Now, we'll get into excess levy capacity a little further out. But I think that's why it's a bigger discussion here, because the town does have the ability to raise property taxes 4% in 1 year because of that excess levy capacity. So it is a lot of authority, and the Finance Committee plays a very important role in really digging into what's being asked for and weighing that against what the impact is going to be to the taxpayer. So I do think it's important, and I think that the weeks, the meeting after meeting, that you put in a lot of time during the course of the budget, and it's a very important role, and I think it has meaningful results. So keep that in mind at the end of October when you're halfway through and frustrated. So those were the general type duties that you have. Then you have some specific to budget and finance and budget
Folks generally
development.
come to agreement? So you
Yeah,
mentioned 2 years ago, people threw their hands up. But in general, during that informal give and take, the town departments in the school generally have adhered to the guidelines when they presented the budgets for town meeting?
They get
Generally,
close.
yes.
Yeah, they get close,
And
yeah.
Yeah.
several years ago, they didn't, so they went to town meeting and asked the taxpayers to vote.
Yep. Okay.
So the guideline process. So you, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but the guideline process is really the focus for you from when you come together in September, really through November 30th, or actually we'll go into the beginning of December. You get a little bit of a break, December into January, and then at the end of January, it gets busy again. So what you do in October is, as you know, Mary, as the chair of the subcommittee, sent out letters to all of the budgeting entities asking a series of questions over the next couple of months. Answers will be provided to those questions, and one by one, the superintendent will come in for CPS and the district. The town manager will come in. We'll have a representative from Minuteman, VOTEC. Typically, it's the town's representative on the school committee, and their school business manager will come in and talk to you about, this is at the very beginning of the budget development process, but talk to you about what they're seeing, how they closed the prior year, and really just on a very high level, what they're seeing. Is anybody looking to add new positions or new programs? And then you'll take all of that information in. You work with me. I put together the revenue estimates, and I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I'll put together revenue estimates, so you'll have those, and then I'll put together the fixed cost estimates. And we'll sit down, have multiple meetings, and go through that, and then you'll work through your guidelines process. So you issue a tentative guideline at the end of October, and then the final guideline at the end of November, beginning of December this year.
Maybe you're gonna do this later, but do you cover sort of the difference between sort of the
Yeah.
total budget and what guideline covers?
Yeah. I will.
Guideline isn't everything, so you need to understand what piece we actually have.
Most of it, though.
Most of it, but CapEx is not in there, right? And there's some
Debt
fixed
exclusions,
costs
the
that
debt
are not,
exclusions
right?
are-
So that confused me, so.
Yeah.
Except we did ask this year for more information about debt as part of the guideline process. But you're right, the number we published doesn't cover
Nothing to
excluding
do with
debt.
capital expending, right? So it's really the operating budget numbers, excluding things like healthcare. So there's some stuff that isn't in there that you'd be surprised is not in there.
So that's just an overview on the guidelines process. Then you're also in charge of making recommendations on any other financial articles that are brought forward. So in December, the warrant will open, and the warrant really is the agenda for town meeting. And interested parties can submit a warrant article to be included on the warrant or on the agenda. And any of those that have a financial impact are brought to you to make a recommendation pretty much after you finish up with the guideline, and before you have your public hearings on the guidelines, if at all possible, or in a perfect world. A lot of times, there will be, so the warrant is, there's a finite period of time that you can put an article on the warrant, and that's roughly the beginning of December until the beginning of January. So articles will go on. Sometimes they're not completely defined. They get defined over a period of time, and sometimes they're just not ready to be brought forward to you, unfortunately, until you're in the public hearing portion of the budget. All of these articles will go to public hearing too, but ideally, after you've done the budget, you have an opportunity then to look at the articles before the public hearing, because then in March, you will look at your guideline again and either give it a thumbs up or change it. Usually, it's just a thumbs up because it's hard to change it at that point in time. But ideally, that's what the process is. You're doing budget first, then the separate articles, and then in the public hearings, looking at everything together.
You're giving a thumbs up to the guidelines that second time, or the budget?
I didn't hear the first part.
You said you give it another thumbs up. Is that the guidelines you're giving a thumbs
The
up to? Or the budget?
guidelines. The guidelines percent increase. You take one last look at that before town meeting. Sometimes, if there's still some back and forth between the town and the school and the committee, you're still working through that. We might get lucky, and I'll talk about how the state goes through its budget process. We do get some money from the state. It's not a lot, but sometimes that can make the difference. And sometimes we might have an idea in March that maybe a number that we're carrying in the budget for state aid is not,
Or we
is
might have
probably not
better
how it's
revenue.
gonna shake.
Yeah.
The reason I am asking is, at the last meeting, discussion, and I know that's just a guideline, right?
Right, it's a
But the
guide,
guideline is based on 2 objective measures,
right.
so those can change. And you might want to revise the guideline based on the bond and whatever else it was.
You mean the sustainable growth rate or the guideline?
No,
Right, there you
Oh.
go, there you go, thank you.
Two
I
different
was
things.
confused, thank you,
Yeah.
that's it,
Yeah.
yep, thank you. Never mind,
Yeah.
thank you.
So when,
The guideline is
Yeah,
is
yeah,
much
no,
more art
yeah,
than science.
exactly,
Yeah,
That's- Well, it's
Let's
confused,
hope
thank
it's
you.
better this year.
right. I don't know. Well, we'll see. But it was.
is really zeroing in on the guideline that we approved? Is it,
So you have to approve the preliminary by the end of October
okay,
and the final by the end of November.
But then, as Carrie said, even as late as March, we could relax that guideline a little bit.
we can adjust the guideline.
Right, and at that point, we're no longer publishing a guideline, we're saying we're going to go in and support the budget
Right.
that the school presents, or we're gonna fight the budget that the school presents. So like last year, I think we went into March with $150,000 difference between us and the elementary schools. So we didn't go and say, we're gonna publish a new guideline, we just went in and said, okay, we'll support your budget, because we had other revenue sources.
So they
So-
prepare the budget based on the guideline we give them, and then we just keep talking. They come back and they say, we could do this, we couldn't do that. Our labor costs were higher than what you gave us, and so here's why. So then it's a discussion at that point, and you either agree or you disagree. on
Okay,
that.
but all of that is done before the report is
Yes.
printed,
Yeah.
Yes,
finalized.
yes.
But we,
Whatever is in the report, that's it.
Well,
Unless
last year,
something happens
last
that-
year,
Yeah,
the
we
report
had-
was published
yeah.
before we had an agreement with the schools.
Yeah.
Because the flurry of activity is right before town
Yeah.
meeting, and there's all sorts of conversations that, so sometimes the report is a little bit premature, and we're very clear about that in the report. As of this report, there's still a discrepancy.
But we were pretty close by that.
We
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
$146,000
we were
difference.
close. I mean, $30 million budget, right? So.
That was like you were like,
question about process.
Yeah.
So letters have gone out to the various departments in town and the school committee and the regional school district. We've told them what the sustainable growth rate is,
yes.
right? We're hoping that based on past budget, sustainable growth rate, they keep within that limit. If they exceed that limit, our guideline, we get preliminary budgets from them,
Yep.
which we review. We try to establish a guideline based on their preliminary budgets, this new information, with consideration of our sustainable growth rate, and looking at potential other sources of revenue that could help us out. So it's kind of this broad process of
Exactly.
looking at all, yeah, okay.
I look at the sustainable growth rate as kind of like a baseline. We should expect costs to rise by
Right.
this, and hopefully wages and everything else are in response to that. And anything else above that would have to be an increase in services, or we have revenue to cover it, which is what you said.
Right, but some things might be mandated, right?
That's true.
So, which would have really not a lot of control over, and you maybe have to rob Peter to pay Paul. That's kind of how
But
the
that's the
game works.
question we ask.
Right.
It's, yes, yeah,
All right.
you good.
It can get tense at times.
Yes, it can.
Yes, you
It
can.
can. It can. I'm beginning the third year. I think last year was a little better than the first year I was on. I was totally blown away. And it can get pretty tense because the finance committee has spent so much time
Right.
saying, okay, the townspeople really can't afford taxes to just go. So we've spent a lot of time with recommendations, and what we would like to see
Yeah.
the budgets come in at. And sometimes it starts out really,
Yep.
really different, or it can get.
Carrie, just to backpedal a little bit, under responsibilities, wasn't there a warrant item 3-4 years ago requiring essentially a forecast from FinCom?
Yeah.
Yes.
5 year.
The 5-year,
Projection, yeah.
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 Is that going to be covered in here as well, or?
Yes, so the next thing I was going to mention is the report. This is the the
Right.
current year Finance Committee report. There are specific requirements, things that must be included in the report, including the 5-year forecast. And that was, the 5-year forecast was added at special town meeting 2011, that requirement.
Time flies, yeah.
3 or 4 years ago, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm with you. So the Finance Committee report, most of this is produced either through the chairs, the chair of Finance Committee, the chair of the Guideline Subcommittee, and my office. As you all have observer assignments, there is a place in the report for you to write up a narrative on your observations if you think that it's appropriate to include in the report. And if you are observing a committee that's putting forward a financial article, you probably want to have something. So I think as you go out and you meet with your committees, you start going to those meetings, you want to keep in mind that in March or February, you potentially have a paragraph that you might want to write up to include in the report. If you choose, you certainly don't have to, but it's very helpful to have a couple of members who are interested in doing that. I also think probably the chair of the committee and the chair of the subcommittee wouldn't mind having people who would be interested in helping write up just the general narrative. As I mentioned, I put a lot of this together. I don't have any problem with that, but I can't really write the narrative for the committee. I can't speak for the committee, and so it's a big commitment to put this report together, especially after months and months of meetings. But that's something to keep in mind, that we do still have that to do. So moving right along on slide 6 here. So how do you discharge your duties? You do have one regular meeting a month. It's the last Thursday of the month unless there is a holiday. You do sometimes have special meetings, and the one meeting a month does not include the work of the Guideline Subcommittee. And you have your observer assignments, and then I am your your staff person. And there are a couple of other members of my staff that may come to a meeting from time to time. So I just wanted to give you an idea. This is finance and administration. I'm the director of the department. There are 5 divisions. The budgeting group works out of finance administration, and you may have the opportunity to meet John Harris, who is the budget and purchasing manager. Brandon Roberts is our budget analyst. He might be here from time to time. Obviously, the town manager is here making budget presentations. I also work with a number of other committees. We have an audit advisory committee. I work with them, the retirement board, the insurance advisory committee, trustees of town donations. I have a staff member that works with the school building committee, and then we expect to work with the new capital planning committee when that committee task force group, however that moves forward. The team.
The town clerk works for you?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So now, I'd like to touch just a minute on the reserve fund transfers and the year-end transfers, now that we don't have anything in front of us, just to make sure you understood what you did and why we did it, and you can let me know what you don't want to do in the future. So I'm going to start first with the reserve fund transfers. So the reserve fund is authorized under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 6, and it allows the town to establish a fund for extraordinary and unforeseen expenditures. And I highlighted those because it doesn't say emergency, and I know people are saying emergency, but it's extraordinary or unforeseen. Unfortunately, the state law doesn't define what those mean, but those are the two different categories. The state law says that it must be appropriated by town meeting. In Concord, it's actually appropriated under the town's guideline budget. So it's not, it's part of Article 7. It's a line item, one of the 39 lines in the town's budget. So therefore, it's viewed as it's for extraordinary or unforeseen expenditures of the town, not the school.
But it's outside the guideline.
No, it's in the guideline.
The 250 was in the guideline?
The 225 is one of the 39.
But when the town manager comes to us with a budget, is that included in that?
Yeah, it is. And the cap on the reserve fund is it may not exceed 5% of the prior year levy. So for us, for the current year, it'd be $4.5 million. You know,
what do
we
other
have
towns have in your experience? Is this?
You know, I was in a smaller town before here for much longer, and it was $75,000. It's
Percentage-wise, was it a similar percentage?
yeah, I would say it was probably a pretty
Doesn't sound
similar
unreasonable for contingency. no.
percentage.
We only have 250,000 though, right?
225.
225.
225.
It
Yeah.
could be 4.5.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
So, and theirs, you're saying was only 75, the town?
Yeah. And
So-
I think the
most, is it fair to say most towns don't go anywhere near the 5%?
oh, absolutely. No, that would be really crazy to do something like that.
Can you define the prior year's levy?
So I do have a slide that shows that. We can take a look at that. So on this slide, and this, again, I was telling people before we started, I got a new computer this week, and Microsoft Excel 2016 doesn't necessarily like to import older Excel documents. So I've updated some of these, but some of these I'm just using, but we're talking about the concepts here, and they don't change year to year. So even though this is fiscal 18, oh, you can't see my cursor. This is slide
Can
17.
we shut that
Yep.
shade? Would that help you if we did that?
No, it doesn't seem like it shows up. So
Tell us what we're looking at.
the box on the top in the right-hand column, the revised fiscal 18, that $82,000 number. We would be looking at 5% of that. And again, this is fiscal 18, and I calculated 20.
Taxes that we
Oh.
levied.
That's what we levied
That's what we
last year.
levied, that's the taxes we charge.
And that includes just property
Just
tax?
property
Just
tax.
property tax.
Property, yes.
And that's, so if you keep going down, I think that would help weight a lot. So you start with what we raised last year, right?
Yeah, and so if you're looking at the column fiscal 17,
Mm-hmm.
and you start with the prior year tax levy of $78 million.
Mm-hmm.
We add, well, that was a funny year because we had a new growth adjustment. Maybe if you just set aside that new growth adjustment. We take the prior year levy, we multiply that by 2.5%, because we're allowed to increase property taxes by 2.5% without any additional voter authority.
Right.
Then we add in new growth. So whatever tax revenue we will get from new growth, and that becomes our base within the limit, within the levy limit.
Okay, so it doesn't include any overrides.
Right, so,
And you said we had more flexibility for some reason. The town has more flexibility beyond the 2.5%.
Yeah, so
Accumulates,
if-
it accumulates.
if you go
Or like
down,
credits.
If you're under the levy, if you're under proposition 2.5, that goes towards the next year.
So it's
Yeah.
almost like a credit.
so if you look at
Carry
Carry forward.
the bottom two lines, you see unused levy capacity. So the unused levy capacity in fiscal 17 was $4,332,000, and that represented 5.28% of the levy. So we could have levied, the maximum allowable levy that year was $88,382,000, but we only needed to levy based on town meeting appropriations, $84,050,000.
So the unused levy operates as a carry forward? Is that what that is?
Yeah, it is carried forward. It's not raised, it's
Right.
just, it's available to be
Available to be
raised.
raised.
And it does grow.
Okay. What about,
If you don't propose that as part of the budget, then it really doesn't roll over to the next year.
It's available.
It's
It's
like a cap
It's like
calculation.
But it's
I
not,
look at it like
It's like a
headroom.
cap calculation, right? So you're just evaluating what you're levying against that number.
Well, I look at it like kind of headroom, right? You can go up to this point, and then after that, you have to go up to, you have to have an override,
Have an
right?
override,
Yeah.
which you can do.
But the carry forward,
Yeah.
right,
Mhm.
increases, raises that
But
headroom for
you're
you.
not proposing this on the budget, this number on the budget.
Yes.
Right, it's
So
just,
to answer your
Yes.
question.
correct, it has to be in the budget, yeah,
yeah.
It's not, I'm saying it's not in the budget. It's-
that is correct.
But when we're setting the guideline, okay,
Yeah.
the two things, at least what I kept in mind, and tell me if I should have been thinking about more things, but one is, what's gonna be the effect on the average property tax bill? And then what is happening to our levy limit?
Right,
So those are the two things that I keep, right? Is that,
Yeah.
so, are we bumping up against the levy limit? So we're threatening, or we're making ourselves vulnerable to an override? And also, what's the property tax bill increase gonna be? That's what what do you think,
That's
Christine?
right.
Is that-
No, that's right. That's what we look at.
Yeah, that's what
Those
we
two of
look
the
at.
things we're looking at. There's
Yeah.
a nice chart that
Carrie
Kerry
does
shows us, and it shows us exactly, so if you do if you do it this percent, that percent, it shows you exactly
Right.
where would you be. So if we're talking about a guideline of 2% or a guideline of 5%, she'll show you all along that continuum what happens to the property tax for the median property, and then what happens to the levy limit. So you can see
We'll-
how close are we coming.
We'll look at that chart.
and then
too.
back,
But that's- do you wanna
and
look
then-
at that?
go back to the slide that we were talking about.
yeah, the reserve fund,
Yeah.
exactly.
What's the basis for 225,000 or a $500,000 or whatever goes into this reserve fund?
So it's been $225,000 for a number of years, and that number's worked. You know, we haven't, I know this year we used all of it. We actually used all of it last year to cover some of the snow and ice deficit. It's just, it works for the size of the budget and what our historical trends have been.
Okay, So if the money is used, say at the end of the year, it goes over and it supplements one of the other line items. Next year, well, I'll just use Estabrook Woods as an example. We're in the midst of that, so it's not unforeseen. And I'm not sure if it's really an extraordinary expense at this point. So in theory, if those are the uses of the reserve fund, next year we could use the reserve fund for the litigation if we needed to find money for it?
I think you could, but it's at the sole discretion of the finance committee to decide, is this expenditure unforeseen or extraordinary? Now, one thing to keep in mind, and I would agree at this point, legal expenses for Estabrook are certainly not unforeseen. Are they extraordinary? You know, that's for you to decide. But one thing to keep in mind is next month, we will start putting the budget together for July 1st, 2021. So when we put the 19 budget together, it was July 1st, 17, and we didn't have an Estabrook Woods litigation. And so, yes, when we're at the end of the fiscal year, well, it's no longer unforeseen. You've been fighting this for a year. But the only time that we make budget adjustments we put the budget together at town meeting. We could make a budget adjustment at a special town meeting or at the following annual town meeting. And so I think that's what makes it tough, is just the budget is put together so much in advance of when we're even working with that budget.
But if it's water under the bridge and it comes to us, like these legal expenses, right, our hands are tied.
Not really.
I mean, well,
We're not saying don't pay it. We're saying don't pay it out of the reserve.
Yeah, and
You can cut services elsewhere.
Or you could take it out of one of the other
Right, that's what I mean.
year
line items
end.
that were under budget.
Sure.
But I think that going forward, I think if you're suggesting that maybe next year we could maybe increase this line to maybe cover that, I think next year we want to be more transparent about what and we did that in the guideline letter. You know, we were very explicit and we talked about that and voted on it. So it's going to be more discreet, more stick out there. It's not going to be just reserve fund.
So this year, when we go through the budget process, we're gonna be looking for
Exactly.
the budget for that piece of litigation.
Exactly.
So it shouldn't come as a surprise to us that we're under accrued, right?
Budget Estabrook Woods into this.
No.
That should go on legal
That's right.
Should be going
That's right.
back.
That should be now
Right.
be going. into
Right,
the-
it
We
should be
did-
in its
we
own
did
line.
have- We did have a special town meeting, though. Where
We did, and we
could
raised
have-
it.
We could have.
We
but
could have
didn't raise
raised it
enough,
more.
and
That's
could have
exactly
raised-
right.
And we asked for that.
Yes, we
And-
did.
and-
Yes, we did.
We should
We did.
also leave open the possibility, even though we're asking the lawyers
Yep.
to forecast what hearings and
You're
boom, 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 judges or somebody throws a wrinkle and
It's
it can
always
still end up being above
Right.
the budget they submitted.
That's right.
So-
That happens with
Right.
any
Okay.
line item.
Exactly.
And that's
Right.
what-
So-
It's a forecast.
And that's
I
what
don't
the
want anybody
reserve
to
is
think,
really
it's all
for.
gonna be illegal and we shouldn't use this in the
Yeah.
future for legal.
We-
No,
we-
we're not saying that.
saying
We're
that.
not
Right.
saying
No,
that.
good.
We're
Yeah.
saying, let's be more explicit
I
about
agree.
what we're
I agree.
committing to.
Yep, no,
We,
that's good.
we also carry free cash, correct?
we have free cash.
We don't give it back, yeah.
We don't give it
Well,
back.
We do,
No,
actually, we do.
So we give back $1 million a year, but
Give back
but the
$1 million.
balance we keep, right? So it's tax revenue that was
Sorry.
raised.
so what discretion do we have over free cash?
Free cash is appropriated by town meeting, so you could recommend it as a funding source.
But it has to be approved by the
And
town.
it's town,
So like
It's-
what-
it's
so like-
taxpayer money,
it's-
yeah.
I know, I
Yeah, yeah.
understand that.
It's like we were talking about the middle school stabilization fund.
Right.
Yes,
And opening that, free
Yes.
cash can go into that for future
and that would be
years.
from free cash.
Assuming there's a warrant item that
Town.
That
town would
authorizes
approve.
it,
Right.
yeah.
And when we take $1 million to offset taxes every year from free cash, we tell the town that as well.
We do.
So that's
That's
all
a separate
disclosed, right? That's an article,
Yep.
yeah.
Where does the money come from for extraordinary expenses for snow removal? Does
So-
it come from here?
So
or-
there are two things that state law would allow you to deficit spend for. One is for snow removal, one is for court judgment, not legal expenses, but an actual court judgment.
What's a court judgment?
A court judgment.
Against you.
So for the snow removal, we have an amount in the budget, I want to say $625,000. And if we go over that, we can deficit spend. We have to raise it the following year within the levy limit.
Why
So-
do you think you had to raise it?
Yes,
Next year.
yeah.
You do have to raise it the next
Yeah.
year.
But what we have done, this is something that I've always done, if we have something left over in the current year and we have a deficit, well, then I'm looking to just
Move it
move with
over.
money
Right.
that has,
Right.
you've
Right,
already,
exactly.
you know, it's already in the budget, we
So you
don't
have
need
to
it.
Carry
So
forward then.
then you don't
Yeah.
have to carry
Yeah,
it forward.
yeah.
Got it.
But when we budget, you will see we have an allowance for a snow and ice deficit. So in fiscal '21, when we start that process, you will see that we have an allowance, I want to say maybe $150,000 or $175,000 plugged in the event that we have a deficit. And that's something that will also come out. And then, you know, your budget may project a 3.5% property tax increase, but then we're able to back that out and maybe it's 3.3%. And then the state budget is passed and maybe we're at 3.2% or something like that. So that's reserve fund, that's all finance committee. The year-end transfers that you also looked at, that is a process that is allowed to transfer between line items with the approval of the finance committee and the select board. So the process I follow is I come to you first and then I go to the select board. The statute doesn't say I have to come to you first and the select board, but if I come to you and you say, no, I'm not gonna go to the select board, I'm gonna come up with another plan, right?
Right.
And that's just for town items, right? Because town and Concord Public Schools, but the regional high school does their own transfers, is that right?
So it's actually, this year-end transfer process is just for the town.
Just
It's
for the
not for,
town.
it's not for
Not for
CPS.
schools. Okay.
And the reason is, we'll just talk about the legal difference between the two budgets. So Concord Public Schools, the school district, their budget is approved in one line item.
Right.
And if they want to transfer, obviously they have a big budget document, they have a lot of different line items. If they want to transfer at any point during the year, the superintendent can go to the school committee and they handle that process. That process does not exist on the town side. The process on the town side is, and there's a handout, the town has its budget appropriated in 39 lines. So the town manager, me as the CFO, we have to adhere to those lines. And we do the 39 lines. So you can see line 1 has A through F.
Right.
We're taking something through this process if we exceed the total of items
category.
1A through F.
So within a given category, you can
move around.
you can move money, you
without
can use
coming
funds
to us.
around without coming.
Yeah,
to us.
and there are, you can see in the handout, some of the legal services, there's just one line. And so that's the process that we have. Either we could take it to town meeting, an annual town meeting, but annual town meeting is in April. And so we don't necessarily know in April how we're gonna close the year. So again, in the Modernization Act that was approved in 2016, it gave us a little more latitude with this year-end process so that we could close the year.
So it's May 15th to July.
To July, it's May 1 to July 15. And I think we did a good job this year. It's very difficult because we run our last accounts payable cycle of the fiscal year on July 15.
Mhm.
And so to do that,
Really need,
and
need
then,
until August to kind of figure it out. don't
well,
you?
we did it,
Yeah.
we were able, because we brought something to you at the end of June,
Okay.
and we were pretty close. And then to the select board on July 15th, and then to you, July 25 or 26, whenever. So pretty close, but it is really virtually impossible with all of the other state requirements to also do that, but by July 15th, but we were very close. So then, getting into budgets, we prepare a lot of different budgets. We have the general fund operating budgets, and we'll get into guidelines versus non-guidelines, but general fund budgets, you're looking at a budget from the town, from Concord Public Schools, from the district, and at the district, we're just you're looking at the budget in total, but we're looking at the impact of the assessment, and so the district's budget could go up 5%, and Concord's assessment could go up 7%, because the assessment is based on the enrollment at the school. So if the enrollment shifts and there are a higher percentage of Concord students this year than last year, so that gets tricky. And
historical too, right? It's what the enrollment was last year, not what it's projected to be.
Theirs is projected enrollment. Minuteman is a rolling.
history. Yeah, they have a different regional
I thought
agreement.
CCRSD was what it was last year.
Well, their enrollment based on October 1, right? So October 1, 2019 will be what the fiscal 21
So you're
budget
right.
is based on. Yeah.
Technically, it's a year or 6 months early or whatever. Yeah, it's not like Minuteman. Yeah.
So then we also have a so you have the Minuteman budget. They'll come in and talk to you. You have a capital improvement plan to look at. We'll talk about that a little bit more.
That's the small stuff. So what the thing that I was talking about, that's the big stuff that's out. This is small stuff that ends up to be about 5 million. So you'll see it, but that's not what I was talking about.
Yeah.
I was talking about big stuff,
And that
like
does-
a middle school. That stuff you don't
But
see.
that capital also include the schools, or that's exclusive of the schools? It's everything but the schools?
No, the schools have it in their
In-
plan. You'll see their plan right in there.
So we have operating capital that we do just a cash outlay for. Typically, these are items that are $100,000 or less. Those are in the operating budgets. The police cruisers, things.
Ambulances and
the-
fire
And
trucks.
the school is in that as well.
In the school operating budget, they will account for small
Small stuff,
capital, the
right.
stuff you're paying cash for.
Okay, then but I thought that some of the school's capital spending was in the town's budget.
It's in the debt plan. So we have what we're paying cash for in the operating budget. Then we have a debt plan, which is really the capital plan. And that has both town and school expenditures. And the debt plan is for items that are typically over $100,000, and we're borrowing for that.
And Carrie, remind me, what is the policy as far as the percent of the total budget that is usually earmarked for the capital plan?
So
Is it 7 to 8% of it?
capital overall is 7 to 8% of the budget. No more than 5% of that is on our larger capital that we're debt financing within the levy limit. 2 to 3% is through cash outlay.
So can I just rephrase what you said to make
Yeah.
sure I understand? So if I'm gonna buy a server and I throw down cash, that's the 2-3%.
Yes.
But if I'm gonna buy that building and I'm taking out a loan,
Yeah.
the debt service
Debt
on that
service
loan is in the 5%.
is in the 5%, yes.
If it's included debt, not excluded debt, right?
Well,
Is that included?
the capital, the 5% cap would not apply to excluded debt.
So if you want to build a school, that's out.
That's excluded.
That's
That's
a whole
excluded.
separate
So,
thing.
so what makes and who decides what's excluded?
Well, that by town meeting vote. So the history of the town is that the smaller capital items, I would say anything under $3 million or so, looking at past practice, that's in the debt plan. That's part of the within the levy limit. Anything that's getting over that is potentially up for discussion about whether or not that's going to be excluded. And the exclusion is voted by town meeting and a ballot question.
You have to
Right, I
have a
understand,
vote.
but somebody has to, so we have a new town manager coming,
Yeah.
and is it a he or
He.
she? He. can say, you know what, I understand past practice, but
Yeah.
I really want a much more unified view of the budget. And even the school, new school, the debt service I want included on here. And while we've traditionally been 7 to 8, if we do that, it'll push 12.
Yeah.
And for the next 15 years, we're going to push 12. They can make that recommendation of the board, and they can go with it without a vote from town meeting. Do you see what I'm saying? There's
The
a
pers-
difference
the
between
pers-
having to go versus making the
Yeah.
early decision to do that.
Yeah, but
So-
then you'd run through Prop 2.5, right? So that's the whole purpose of it. Yeah, yeah.
I'm just.
So we have a 5-year capital plan. And if in this 5-year period, the middle school is approved, the middle school will appear in the capital plan. And it will be, you know, you'll see what the debt service payments are. What's not happening, really is the purpose of this new capital planning committee, is talking about when those things are going to come on. Now, talking about what's going to come on 5 years out or 10 years out, and that's what's not happening right now. So it's not that we know these things are happening and the town's made a commitment and we're just not showing them in the plan. There's been no commitment, and so we're only showing in the plan what there's been a commitment to.
Including the excluded items, right, is in the plan, meaning because we're paying debt service. It's gotta come
Yeah,
from somewhere.
we do. So the capital plan shows when items would be up for approval. In our debt service schedules, you can see what we're actually paying debt service on.
Can you tell me the rationale behind the policy of keeping these guideposts, 7 to 8% for debt service in a given year? What was the reason for that? Because it seems like we blow by that. So what was the do you know?
We blow by it when you add in the exempt
Yes,
portions. Is
yes,
that
yes.
so?
So what was the what were we hoping to achieve by having these guardrails that says, you know, our debt service in any given year should be 7 to 8% of our total spending?
So I think it really has to do with our credit rating. There are a number of indicators, as you know, because we had that presentation a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things that Moody's really likes about Concord is the rapid amortization of our debt. And so we felt, and I wasn't here when we put this together, but that 7 to 8%, no more than 5% financed. We pay 60% over the first 5 years, and we're paying 90% over 10 years. We don't have much except for the large projects that goes out past 10 years, and it really best practice for a AAA rated community in Massachusetts.
So, okay, so the 7 to 8% is being used as a way to determine the terms that we want to agree to with our lenders. But what about spending? Was it in any way trying to time spending for capital, or what? See, it seems to me like it was done mechanically, which is fine.
Yeah.
To make the terms of our debt and the timing of our debt, but it really wasn't there to restrict spending or time spending or smooth spending. Do you know?
Yeah. So I can tell you, just my observation is that the 5% that we're financing, the small capital items, we don't have, for the most part, don't really have any trouble working with that cap. But the 2 to 3%, the operating capital, what we're paying cash for, every year we're shoving stuff out, and saying next year. So we really, from the way that we're operating, really need more money allocated to the smaller things. And not that we necessarily would be looking for less of 5%, but we're really closer to 2%. We're really about 7% overall. And we probably could be at about 3.5% on the smaller.
And that would be within the guideline.
That would be within the guideline.
So the guideline is what's pushing that, putting pressure on that.
Yeah, or just, other
Payroll.
priorities,
Payroll.
right? It's,
Payroll
it's,
puts the pressure on, right? So payroll.
Mostly, you're right, but
Yeah.
but
So what has been the consequence of this long-term or medium-term sort of kicking the can down the road on these other items?
On the
Well, the 2 to
small,
3%, yeah.
you know, I think I noticed it more this past cycle, a little bit less. So I think it's just sort of coming to a head right now. I don't think there's any significant consequence right now, but I do think if we
Well,
continue.
let's take an example. Is it the fact that that you just got the Windows computer when you should have gotten it 3 years ago, or
It's
what is it?
everything that the town manager talked about that wasn't included in the budget. Right? I mean, it could have been personnel.
No, we're talking capital equipment.
Yeah.
or
Well,
just-
I mean, it
that-
is-
No, it could impact though the other, right?
They're definitely, so one of the items, Public Works, their small and medium-sized equipment that would fall under this $100,000. They typically would have a percentage of that 2 to 3%. And in fiscal '20, that was shaved back by $50,000. That doesn't have any immediate consequences because there were savings in other parts of that budget, so that could be made up. But in a year that couldn't have been made up, then maybe it meant that we would have a piece of equipment. It certainly, we're not really buying, well, we are buying the trucks. I mean, some of their trucks are,
It's a year older
Yeah,
now,
two,
and
yeah.
there's more
Yeah.
maintenance than
Or one
newer
breaks
trucks.
down, you don't have money to buy a new
Yeah,
one, so you're
exactly,
dealing with the
yeah.
one last truck.
You're
Okay.
maintenancing
So
your
trucks and
a
stuff
little
like that you're talking about.
That's the
That's
fire
big
station in the firehouse in West Concord and the EMTs and the equipment there, the trucks for the EMTs or whatever, the vehicles for the EMTs. And that's been in the pipeline for a few years. That's been in the last 5 years, not for the town manager to be talking about it at town meeting, but this is coming, et cetera. So then, if that is delayed, that's an impact.
Okay, yeah.
But that's what when the town manager comes to present the budget, that's exactly what
Goes to
you
the
can
council.
ask, and he'll talk about that. He'll tell you what he wanted and what he could get and what he couldn't get.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Another question. We use terms like excluded and exempt.
yeah.
Can you define those for me?
So they mean the same, and it's if you're doing something either excluded or exempt, it means in reference to Proposition 2.5. So you're going above what Proposition 2.5 allows, and you can only do that with both a vote of town meeting and at the ballot, an affirmative vote.
So that sometime they relaxed Proposition 2.5 and said, you can get around 2.5 with debt, right? So you don't have to stay within that 2.5 limit, right? If you finance with debt. So it was a way to relax Proposition 2.5.
So you can service the
That's
debt
high
above,
school or-
above the 2.5%?
If
So it
people
doesn't
vote,
count.
if they go to
If
the
they
ballot
vote,
and
if
vote.
it's
If they,
excluded.
okay, I know,
Right, town
that I
says,
understand, that I
If
understand.
it's not,
It's a
you
way
run into
to
a
spend
problem
money
with this one.
without
Yeah.
bumping up against the levy limit,
Right.
right? Without having to go for an override.
Right.
And so it's like this little
Right.
off-balance
Backdoor.
sheet.
Well,
Well,
I mean,
and
effectively, it is an override, though.
It's but it
I mean,
is, exactly.
It is.
Yes,
It is an
It's
override.
just, it doesn't have
It's
the
for a
baggage,
specific
or it
thing.
doesn't have the drama
Yeah.
that an override has.
Exactly right, it is
Right.
an override.
But
You're right.
where does the debt service
And
for
you're committing to
this
that
capital
for-
plan here is included
Could
when
be
we're
15
talking
years.
about the budget
Oh, yeah.
and
But, yeah.
preparing that. But what about the debt service
It
for?
would be
It'll be a
excluded
vote.
debt.
It's
That
an override.
go into-
It's an override, that's exactly what it is.
For big
it's
things.
part of the non-guidelines budget.
Part of the non-guideline, oh, it's part of the.
That's why I was asking the question I was asking, right?
Yeah.
About you could theoretically make,
You
not
could.
exclude it, but you run into the
Right
cap,
into the, right.
and then you'd have to go get an override.
That's right,
So on this sheet, it would go from the blue line to the gray line,
that's
Right.
right,
and then you would have to call it an override.
right. This way you
That
don't.
has a,
I understand.
You just
So
say
the-
it's excluded.
Practically speaking, there's no
doesn't look good on
difference.
your resume.
I understand.
Yeah.
The,
It may be harder to get a yes vote,
Yes, it
right?
might be harder to get a
It may be
yes
hard to
vote.
get a yes vote, right? If you go and say, oh yeah, well, you know, it focuses on what are you doing?
Right.
Versus,
But
"Oh, I
that's
need
a
to do
great,
baseball."
that's a great observation.
So one thing that I want to make sure you understand, with the debt exclusion, the ability to tax above the levy limit only it follows along the debt service, when the debt service is being paid. So when there's no more debt service, that ability to go above goes,
Right.
it is diminished.
That's right.
Right, and so with an override, it's a permanent increase in the levy. And that's just, you know, a distinction.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so the exclusions are just for capital projects.
It goes away.
It goes
Whereas
away.
if you, the override,
It would
yeah.
And so there are two types of exclusions for capital projects. The debt exclusion that goes on for the life of the bonds that you've issued,
Right.
or a capital exclusion, which is a 1-year override, so to speak, to pay for a particular item. Like say you have a fairly small project, $1 million project or a $2 million project, and you don't want to finance that over any period of time. The voters can agree to a 1-year spike to cover that project. That's not something that's done very often, but it is allowed,
Override is permanent?
is
It
permanent.
raises the levy
Raises the
limit.
base.
Raises the
Raises
base.
the base.
So,
So what was the last override that we approved as a town?
So I don't have that in front of me, but
it's in the
yeah,
finance
along,
report.
I think it was
It's-
2007.
is it still,
That sounds,
yeah, it was
I think
along,
it's around then.
yeah, I think you're right, Dave.
yeah.
It's in the report.
So
That's a good point.
one other question that always gets asked about overrides or debt exclusions, what does the rating agency think about those? And the rating agency doesn't care unless you propose them and they're not passed. If you propose them and they're passed every time, they're fine with it. But if you propose it and they fail, then they're gonna ding you for it. Yeah.
So
So,
the debt service that we pay on an excluded debt is not, how does that fit in with our work on an annual basis?
so all of the debt service is part of the non-guidelines budget. So we review that at the front of before you get into the guidelines. We'll look at all of the components of the non-guidelines budget and talk about them, but debt service is one of those because it's a fixed cost. It's, the town has already agreed to do this, whether it's within the levy or outside of the levy. It was approved by town meeting. So
Right.
we identify it as a fixed cost.
So whatever the item
But what we
is that
don't-
we were funding would have been on a warrant at some point, which we
Right.
would have said, we like this, or
Right.
we don't like it.
But what
But
we
then
don't-
after that, it's
Tell me
debt
if I'm wrong,
service.
Carrie, but what we don't have visibility to, when we're setting the guideline and we're looking at what's the impact on the median tax bill, we don't have included in that any other articles that could be passed at town meeting that would add to the debt service burden and therefore the property tax bill. So we're just looking at debt we've already incurred and operating spending that we're looking at then. So anything else that's on at town meeting, or special town meeting is not, we don't have visibility to that.
Until that second round, I'm assuming in March.
That would,
Not
we would-
always, not-
In March, but see, so what Mary is saying, the warrant doesn't open until December.
I understand.
You voted your final guideline at the end of November. So you could have already decided, oh, okay, 3.5%, we can go with 3.5%.
Right, right.
And then in December, find out
Sure,
there's,
but
It's
then
in
in
middle
March, I
school.
thought the notion is you look at everything and then you could
Yes.
sort of give a thumb.
You-
And
We have
could-
better visibility.
Right?
We do.
You
We
do.
have- We
You've
definitely
got-
have.
You've got
and
a
by
little bit
then-
less
You do, but
flexibility.
by then, it's locked,
A little
right?
too
It's
late
a
to
little too
negotiate,
late.
yes.
Right,
I-
and
The
so,
thing- the place where we're really vulnerable, I think, is the special town meeting spending, where last time we had a special town meeting, we spent quite a bit of money. That was never part of a process that we used as a finance committee to look at,
it's for property.
what is the impact to the levy limit, or what is the impact to property tax?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't a levy. So that's where I think we're particularly vulnerable. But yes, you're right. By the time we get to March, well,
I mean, yeah, I mean, they could always surprise us, right?
Yeah, right.
But on the special town meeting, there's no requirement for the finance committee to do a recommendation or anything?
What Phil
oh, no,
said
there
was-
is.
Oh.
There is. If anytime there's a warrant article with a financial impact, you're making a recommendation. I think the trouble is we have a special town meeting, the warrant's open for 7 days. typically, or 14 days,
I don't remember.
7 or 14, I can't remember, because we did in December, was it?
Was it February?
No, it was in the fall.
No, I think it was in October. So
Yeah.
we had a warrant article,
October.
right.
Yeah.
This all started the notion of the special town meeting. We had a settlement on the W.R. Grace property that the town took by eminent domain, paid the value that was determined by the appraiser. The owner of the property had 3 years to say whether or not he agreed with it or disagreed with it. At the last minute, no, I don't agree with it, I think it's X. You go through a process to negotiate a settlement, and part of the terms of the settlement was, okay, we'll accept this if you pay within so many days. The only way that we were able to do that is a special town meeting. You open a warrant to call a special town meeting, and then
Everybody jumps in.
somebody says, school resource officer, and
How much did we spend, we bought White Pond property?
Yeah, no, I was at the top.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was just one after.
So so the
And
finance
there was a
committee
bunch
had
that
no
came forward
opportunity to.
that we said no. There would have been more, and we said no.
but
So-
the finance committee made a recommendation.
We said no to the special resource
we-
officer.
yeah, we
That was
said-
the only thing we
yeah.
stood up and said no to, which was probably the worst one to pick.
They town meeting over.
So that was
Another quick question about budget. The
Yeah.
enterprise fund budgets, those are self-funding through revenue,
Right.
Yeah.
right? Are
Yes.
those, what defines what goes into I mean, it's kind of self-evident in the list, but
It has revenue.
It
right?
ha- it
It
has-
has a service.
it has
that
a
has
service and it
revenue.
has
Yeah,
revenue.
right.
Right.
and it has to be zero, yeah,
Yeah.
self-funding.
It's
These,
not completely zero. Most of
Right.
them make money, but some of them don't. Like, you'll see, they do zero them out, but like Beatty didn't necessarily make zero.
and the one that I did not add, and it's not an enterprise, but it is, we run it through the enterprise budget process, is PEG, the public, the PEG access.
The public
PEG
access.
That's our,
Yeah.
our new one that I did not include.
So when we do create the budget, we have the excluded debt, we have guidelines, and then we have debt service that have to be added together, correct?
Well, you have guidelines and everything that's in non-guidelines, all of the fixed
Guidelines
costs.
and everything that's
Yeah.
in non-guidelines have to come in
Yeah.
underneath the levy limit, the next year's levy limit.
Well, they have to come in
Unless
under
we
the
go-
levy limit and under the, let me just,
So that is the debt service for long-term capital expenses as well, like a high school.
That doesn't,
That's
that's not part of the
exempt.
levy limit.
Yeah,
That's
it's outside, that's
But
outside the
where
levy.
do we have that money?
It's,
How do we factor
We,
in
we,
the
we,
cost
we raise property
associated
taxes
with it?
for it.
well, we put it, I mean, the assessors take it into account when they're setting the tax rate,
Yep.
right? But we, the finance committee, doesn't set the guideline with that in mind, with that. Because that's excluded debt, it's not part of the guideline process.
So the
At
assessors-
town meeting, we stand up and say whether we support this or not,
Right, but the assessors are the one who have to take that into consideration.
when
They do the math.
Debt service.
They do the math.
They
right.
do the math,
Yeah,
right?
they're just
Yeah,
doing
they're
the
just
math.
doing the math, right? So we know what the
Yeah,
total
they're-
costs are, right? So that there's the budget, there's gonna be an operating budget, and then we know what the debt service is that we've committed to, right? So you have those two pieces, so you're thinking about it right.
Within the levy limit.
Well, forget about the levy of it for a moment, so you just have your total budget, this is what we're
Well,
gonna
we have
spend.
We have two types of debt service.
We
One
do.
within the levy limit and one excluded from the levy limit.
Right,
Yeah.
that's right.
So the debt service that's within the levy limit, does that fall under, do we have to concern ourselves with that? Or do the assessors also look at that?
so maybe if we could look at this slide 15, how we go about putting the budget together and starting the process. So the first thing that's going to happen when we start talking about fiscal 21, on an administrative level, I'm going to project revenue estimates, right? Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to project all of the estimates for the non-guidelines or fixed costs. And by that, I mean the Minuteman assessment, health insurance, OPEB, other post-employment benefits, and we'll talk about that more, the retirement assessment, all of our payroll taxes, our insurance, and debt service. And then to that, whatever state assessments, the state provides us services such as the MBTA, the train service, and we receive an assessment for that, so we project that. We put in an amount for the snow and ice deficit reserve, just so we can plug that in. And then the amount that we put in the overlay. So when I talk to you about what's available for guidelines, I have my revenue estimates. I'm taking out what I've projected for all of those fixed costs, and then your work looking at the 3 budgets, town and the 2 schools, within the available revenue. And for property tax, I start with whatever our unused levy limit was the prior year. I'm holding that number constant. So if our unused levy limit was 4%, my revenue estimate for property tax is going to hold that unused levy limit at 4%. I'll tell you what that number is. But that's going to give you what you have to work with. So we've already taken into account what I think health insurance is going to cost, what debt service is going to be based on what we have on existing schedules and what we've projected.
That's excluded and the one.
That's excluded.
Whatever.
Right, but the
we have to pay it, right? Yeah.
Right, and so it's not that we don't talk about these or you can't talk about these, but these are things that commitments have already been made, and we certainly can talk about how we came up with those numbers, even health insurance, and there was some discussion about health insurance, what the town contribution is. Those things are all negotiated. The plans that are offered are negotiated, so I'm projecting what I think the costs of that will be, and we can spend as much time as you want going through so you understand what goes into that. But it's not like you decide, okay, I can live with a 3.5% increase, and then I say, but the retirement assessment's going to make it go up another 0.2% and all that. It's already taken into account when you're looking at.
Just one question with debt service. When we review that,
Yeah.
do you typically break out line item by line item all of the debt services for the individual items, so we can say, oh yeah, this fire truck from 2010, this from that, or no?
I can show you. I
Can
do
you
have
show
those
that first time? I think
schedules.
that would be helpful for us
Yep.
because that would be helpful for us.
Yep, I can, I have a schedule that shows every item for which we're paying debt every year for the life of that debt.
Do you know how many items are on that? Roughly now, is it 15?
Is it
Oh,
100? Yeah,
it's-
that's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
No, it's 2 pages. I mean, all of, no, I have it on an 11 by 17 because my eyes aren't that great when I need to print it out, and I wish I had it here, but it has all of the, within the levy, excluded, all of our enterprise debt, and that's easy enough. It's all on,
80,
yeah.
How do you
Yeah.
come up with the OPEB?
So OPEB is, let's see,
It sounds like we're retiring. We're also taking on.
Because that seems to change, it does
Or maybe
change
it's not.
annually.
I don't know.
Yep, so here's a slide I have on OPEB. So OPEB is other post-employment benefits. This really has to do with the retiree health insurance benefit that we provide. The town, at some point in its history, accepted Mass General Law offering health insurance to retirees. And so this liability is valued on an annual basis. The requirement is at least once every 2 years. We value it on an annual basis because we are trying to fund our annual required contribution every year. And it does change, right? Because we have this money invested and, the market value changes, and that impacts the actuarial value, and we have, you know, people coming on and going off and all of that. So we're doing it on an annual basis so that we can come as close as possible to funding our annual required contribution on an annual basis.
So I look at this, and then I also think about the school budget, and by underfunding that category, it pushes out the fully funded date, the year of 2038. So who in the town, who determines that that's the year it's not going to change, or a new town manager comes in and he says, I want it fully funded by 2030, something like that?
So we
talk about it.
Yeah, so we're on a closed loop 2038. That's when we plan to have that funded, and we budget each year the amount that is required to get us there.
Okay.
I can't imagine the new town manager coming in and either saying 2030 or 2050. I think either one of those would be.
But it does change
not-
annually because of the number of people in and out of the system as well, right?
Right.
You will see that the high school does not do that.
I know.
Yeah,
I do know
yeah,
that. That's why
Yeah,
it was kind of part of my question.
yep. And neither does Minuteman.
Then, I guess then the other question I have is the sustainability guideline. Is that just based on guideline, or is that based on the entire?
The sustainable growth rate?
Excuse me, yes, the sustainable growth rate,
Yep.
is that based just on the guideline portion? Is it based on?
That's
looking
taxpayer
at-
burden, so it's
the
everything,
so it's everything?
everything.
Okay.
And it's a starting point.
Well, I understand that,
Okay.
but it truly, if we really wanted to adhere to it, it would be 1.78%, right? So I just wanted to have the clarification, it's based on all of our costs for the year.
Yes, yes,
It would be applied to all of our costs.
yes.
That's right.
So actually, it's 2.16, but
So that'll be interesting to see how close we are even at the starting point.
it will be, won't it?
We'll be far away from it, I
The
think.
sustainable growth rate doesn't include excluded.
Yes, it does.
Everything.
Does.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's-
it's what the taxpayer pays.
It's
It's the
it's
growth
saying
in the
this is how
tax
much we
rate.
think
Does.
tax
Yeah.
bills should go up
Tax
per
bill's
year.
gonna go up. So that's how we wanted to look
This is a
at it.
sustainable rate.
Right. What are we doing to people in their tax bill?
When
Everything.
When you open that on,
Because the debt service is included in that year. When you're
Everything's
paying for
in there.
Taxes, you're paying for the debt on that
Everything's in there.
service, so that's
Right.
gonna bump that number.
That's right.
up.
So at this point in time, we've already peaked for exempt debt.
Right.
But you could have a point where you had negative budget growth to account for a peak in debt service. That's not going to happen because we have already peaked.
But if you put in a new middle school,
Right.
you have the
And a new
construction
municipal building.
costs, and then you
Right.
have
Right.
the actual
Um,
Yeah.
debt.
And then I'll,
so when you were talking about the fixed costs, you said debt service, right? These are
Yeah.
things that we've already committed to,
Yeah.
right? Let's fast forward a year from now and say we think that the middle school is gonna come up at that town meeting. Could at that point I asked Peter this when he was here at our meeting, could we get an estimate for what we think the debt service will be including the middle school?
Sure, we just need a number. We just need a number. We I don't even need Peter.
Right now, we
to
don't
do
do that.
that.
But right now, we don't do that. We don't do that now,
This-
right? We don't do it
Well,
for any estimated
we-
debt. We do it for things that are already, we know that we're already committed to them. Is that true?
Well, I'm not sure because I showed you that presentation that I put together that estimated.
No, but I mean, when you're
Yeah.
talking here about the process and you talk about the fixed costs,
Yeah.
No,
and
we
you
didn't
tell
get
us
it.
what are the fixed costs, and you have debt service, right?
Yeah.
So that's
That's the
those are
real money
things-
we're gonna pay.
it's the committed.
Those are
it's
things
the
we're committed to.
That's
right?
why the
That's-
long-range capital plan
That's why we
is
wanted
really
it.
important.
Exactly.
Right.
Because then we
Thank
can
you.
show you.
You're right.
And historically, looking back, the sustainable growth rate relative to the actual budget,
Yep.
what's the var?
lot
I
lower.
don't think
I-
anybody, I don't know if we've ever done that.
I mean, that seems like an exercise.
No, we talked about it. We talked about it last year.
Because
So
that variance will just tell us how, out of line our sustainable growth rate is.
well, it's definitely lower, right? So it's around
tells us how we're
2%.
spending way more than,
Right.
we're consistently spending
More than those two
is
numbers.
sustainable.
And, well, or the town thinks it is, right? So someone's saying, okay, let's go
That's
ahead and
But I
spend
guess
it,
we're
right?
making, we're making our assumptions using these macro indicators.
Right.
Yes,
And the town is, has.
But the town's
The
okay,
town-
the town is okay to it.
the
right?
town has okayed it,
Finance
exactly
committee
right.
said, this is what we want, and the town says,
Well,
okay,
no.
but this is what,
No,
right?
the
But they
finance committee
approved-
has never really come out with a sustainable growth rate, so.
True,
Right.
what
Right.
our going
But-
forward is what we.
But they go to the town meeting and they approve the
Exactly,
taxes, so
yeah.
you're right, they may not see it in that context, and we're gonna put it in that
So,
context for
yeah,
them.
So I think it's
But
an
I think
education.
they're still gonna approve it.
You said something that was interesting, that the sustainable growth rate is a measure or a guideline of how much extra burden the town's taxpayers can bear.
Not extra.
No.
No,
No,
it's
no,
a-
not extra.
it's
burden.
a-
So repeat what you
If
said
you-
about the link to the town taxpayers' affordability.
Yes.
I don't know.
I,
Well, it's
I,
a
to
growth
me,
rate.
it's
to me,
CPI,
it's a,
right?
it's,
Yeah.
look at a macro indicator, this is how prices are rising
Right.
overall,
Right.
right? So
Okay.
we should
And usually
expect that
wages
our
are tied to
prices
that, right?
should, and wages and other
wages
things
are tied to that.
respond to that.
Right.
So these are how the boats are going up, right?
Yeah.
So we should expect reasonably that our costs would be going up by this as well.
Okay, but that's got nothing to do, that our costs,
Yes.
meaning the town's costs,
Yes,
has nothing to do
yep,
with how much a taxpayer can afford to pay out, because the two are independent.
no, I would argue that.
Yes.
no. What do you
I
Because
would-
there are, well, the reason I say that
Yeah.
is CPI is the indicator of the prices that you pay retail, CPIU. That's that Consumer Price Index.
Yeah,
That doesn't reflect whether my income went up or not.
Right.
And so, well, yes. And
Well,
so
when you-
that's why you have real wage growth, which
Yeah.
backs out inflation to actually tell you how much people's incomes went up, right? And in this case, actually, if you really want to think about, well, how much can people afford to pay?
Yes, yes.
The income is the cash, but then you also have to take into account what's happening to housing prices. And that's why I was kind of asking myself,
But,
well,
but
what
the,
is
but the,
that?
but
What
the
do
other
we mean by
challenge, the bigger challenge in town is that there's a gross disparity between,
Right.
I mean, income,
fixed income people on
yeah.
wage earners? I understand that, but I'm just trying to philosophically understand, is the notion that we don't want town costs to go up by a certain amount, which you would use one measure,
yep,
versus trying to figure out how much more the maximum, how much more people can really afford to pay. That would use a different set of macroeconomic indicators. It shouldn't use CPI.
Yeah, and I don't think we're using it for the second.
No, we
It's
are.
not-
well,
We are.
I
But we-
actually said we were.
Yeah, that's why I raised the
I
question.
did,
We
I
are.
said we were. And I guess my thinking is that I think a lot of wage increases and a lot of
Yeah.
returns on investments and social security increases are based on CPI.
No, not investment returns.
Not
Social
investment
security,
returns.
yes.
Well,
Not my wage
A
increases.
low risk, okay,
Oh, well,
a
come
no
on.
risk investment,
What-
which is why we use the 10-year treasury.
Right.
And that's a no risk investment.
Right.
So they're saying, I want to put my money someplace where I can get a return that will shield me from inflation, but I don't want to take any risk.
Right.
So I'm not getting rewarded for risk. So that's why we use that as a
Well,
benchmark for.
it's also a measure of inflation, but wages often are tied to
Yeah,
CPI
yes.
growth.
No, I'm not
No.
saying.
No.
But wait,
They
that was
are.
only one
Wage
measure.
increases
Wait,
are often
that was
tied.
only-
Whose wage increases here in this room are tied to CPI increases?
Plenty of
directly?
companies that I worked at, that
Remember-
was one of the first conversations we
But
had,
wait, it was
so
a
I think it
blend
is in there.
between CPI, the trailing CPI, and the 10-year bill, right? It was an arithmetic
yes.
average between those, right?
Right.
So, can you agree that the 10-year treasury is a good indication of how?
Not income, that's
Of
all I'm
inflation, well, we don't have
telling you.
income,
Again,
right?
I don't wanna get.
No, it's been a big discussion, right?
Prior-
Yeah,
Well-
let's have a financial meeting rather than.
Yeah,
a
so,
meeting.
we've chosen, and that's fine, I just wanted to understand what we were trying to balance, that's all.
There'll be a lot more discussion on this.
I-
There's a lot.
I I don't wanna rehash the discussion, cause we
No,
went through this last year.
We did. We've gone through this 2 years.
And that's why I
actually.
didn't bring it up at the last meeting,
And
right?
we
But
thought
when
we
you
had
said
at
it
least
now-
nailed down how we were gonna measure
And
it.
that's fine, folks made it, and that's good, and that's good.
But I guess we didn't. No, but measuring,
New members should be able to quickly look at this and
measuring
see what it is, right?
it that way, and we
Well,
came up with
that-
this
if it's cost, then-
1.76%
Well, actually, it's
increase.
2.16, but go
Okay,
ahead.
that's what
That's a
is a
different
reasonable amount of
Because I've studied
increase that we
this.
want to
This is
see for
my
the
professional
taxpayer. But what that really is saying is, in all the things that we're going to be, all of the guideline budget, the entire budget has to be within that. So as Carrie was saying, if we've now peaked with one of the schools and our debt service is going down.
Yep.
However, we have the ability to raise based on Proposition 2.5 and what that formula is.
Yep.
It can be more than 2.5%, it can be upwards to 4%, and then budget requests are submitted to take up that slack.
But that's if the
Then-
goal is just to keep within the levy limit. The purpose of the sustainable growth rate was to,
I know, but
Start the
that's,
discussion
what I'm
of-
saying though is that we have to be diligent in looking at what is that differential between 1.76% and what budget requests are coming in at, because otherwise, when we accumulate more debt, we could be in a worse situation because we have used up that capacity already. Does that?
That's what we wrestle with all year.
Yeah, so I think that it really is important to understand what the estimated non-guideline costs are gonna be, to have that information and to see what has shifted in that, if it's gone up or come down.
the sustainable growth rate was really just to start the conversation. And it's really just, this is the way we're
But I
measuring.
think that's
Okay,
right. but I
it's
think
not the
important-
guideline.
No,
Right?
I
Okay.
understand that,
Okay.
but I think it is a good tool to keep in mind as we look at what kind of a guideline do we want to have.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Wow, this is
Sorry
a
about
lot
that.
of information here. And we're on page.
You want to do
So-
free cash?
I know.
No, so this is the guidelines model, and I'm not liking the way that it looks. So,
Why are you
The,
not looking the way it
Appearance?
looks, by the way?
Or,
no, that the tax increase percent impact to the
Very
base
low.
is not looking right to me, but
Just
the
walk us through the columns. We'll ignore the numbers.
so, on the left-hand side,
Yeah.
we have the balance of unused levy capacity.
Yeah.
And then we have the next one over, property tax increment exclusive of debt, so what we would be adding, at various different levels. And then how much of our unused levy capacity would we be using to get to that property tax increment? What the percent increase is to the base. We always look at the difference between the base and new growth in terms of property taxes. Then we add, or the next one over is the percent change, the budget change to guidelines. Other sources is, at some point, if after we've already put the model together, we find out we're getting $500,000 or something like that. We haven't taken it into account, but you want to take it into account because you want to use that to lower what your property tax increase is. So sometimes we're adding something there, how much is allocated to guidelines, and then what the percent changes to the budget. And I know the 3.45 preliminary and the 3.58 are right. Some of the other numbers just aren't looking right to me right now. But yes, this model, we will go through. It's interactive. You can tell me, what if I want to add $200,000? What's the impact going to be? And we do that, and so you can see in real time what the impact is going to be.
So this is something we do after we hear the first round of presentations
Yeah.
by the budgeting entities, and we.
Yeah. So we already looked at that. We looked at property tax. State aid, I'll just spend a minute on this, talking about the process that the state goes through. Again, this graph is fiscal 2018, so it's a couple years old. We're not getting a whole lot of money from the state, and most of the money that we're getting is coming in Chapter 70, which is education aid. The other large category that we have is the unrestricted general government aid. It is tied to the lottery. It used to just be called lottery aid. We don't call it lottery aid anymore, but that is for general purposes. So we're pretty much getting two pots of money, one for education, one for general purposes. The process that the state goes through in approving its budget doesn't line up real well with the process that we go through here. So in December, there is a joint legislative committee that will have a revenue hearing, and they'll agree, generally, they'll agree on what they think the percent increase will be in the state's revenue. That is given to the governor, and towards the end of January, the governor is filing his budget proposal for the fiscal year, which is House 1. That usually comes out around the 20th to the 25th. Then there's a whole lot of nothing that happens. That's, you know, they're working on it, but we're not hearing much about it. The House is typically passing its budget at the end of April. So they go through their committee process, but it's pretty quiet between when the governor files until the House votes on the budget. So it's because of the way that we're putting our budget together here, our budget is finalized by early January. It's hard to we're not even getting the governor's budget, so we're pretty much just looking at historical trends and putting in a very low projection, 0 to 2% tops when we're looking at state aid. So then the Senate will take the budget up in the best of years. They're approving by Memorial Day. It goes to conference committee in June, and by the end of June, typically it's on the governor's desk to be signed. That didn't happen this year. He just signed it this week, so it was a little delayed. But again, you know, we're a community not receiving a whole lot of state aid. State aid is not making or breaking our budget like it is other places, so it's a little easier to deal with the misalignment of the approval schedules. Local receipts, these are fees that we charge locally. Our two biggest local receipts are motor vehicle excise, so the tax that you pay for the privilege of driving your car on the roads in the Commonwealth. That is a local receipt. Building permits tends to be one of our large contributors to this category, and then investment income. So all of the idle funds that the town has are invested. They are invested within the confines of Mass General Law, which is pretty confining. We're typically just using, we use MMDT, the Mass Municipal Depository Trust. We have a decent amount of money in there, and you know, they're pretty much in a money market is where most of our money is right now. We do have some ability to invest stabilization funds, and so we do have some invested in CDs. And then the town has trust funds and the retirement funds that are actively managed, but they're not part of the budget process. So we do generate $500,000 or more each year in investment income, which is, you know, okay. We have a lot of money in the bank, but we have a lot of constraints on how that can be invested.
So we get 0.75% sales tax on everything. That's that number there, the $95,000 to the $145.
The meals tax, is that
That's
the
a meals
hotel,
tax.
motel meals
Yes.
tax? That's all included in the local excise tax.
So that rolls
column.
into the excise tax column. Okay.
Yeah,
Who decides where to do the investments?
I do. I'm also the treasurer for the town. Yeah.
So, Carrie, the stuff that town voted this year on affordable housing, so the permit thing has to go to the legislature, right? So the only thing that's gonna happen is the free cash draw this year. Everything else is prospective, right? There was two things, a transfer tax or.
Oh, that's,
Yeah.
that has
That's
to be
all
approved by the- that has
prospective,
to be
right? So the only thing that's really gonna happen is the draw on free cash. And how much is that gonna be?
$500,000.
Yeah.
$500,000.
And apparently they found a house and they're gonna spend 140.
150, well, maybe
What,
140,
150?
150.
Okay.
Where did they find those?
They found a house right on the corner of Route 2 and Main Street. And they're in a partnership with Habitat for Humanity. So that was actually a really good deal.
That's good.
140,
That's pretty good.
That's a great deal.
140,000 for that.
So we have 4 categories of funds: property tax, state aid, local receipts, and then the final is available funds. And these are monies that we may have access to that require further appropriation. We don't have a lot in this category. If we're taking money from a stabilization fund and we're using it either to fund something in the budget or a special warrant article, that's categorized as an available fund. We also receive a pilot payment from the light plant, so a payment in lieu of taxes. The Concord Municipal Light Plant pays the equivalent of a property tax to the town.
But they're the only entity that does that?
The Housing Authority pays, and then we also receive for state-owned land under the state aid category. State-owned land pays a payment,
But not
they
the
pay
private
whatever
schools.
gets appropriated. It's not necessarily equivalent to property tax, but
But
it
like
is
the
a
private schools in
payment.
town don't pay.
For the hospital.
Or nonprofits.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, the nonprofits.
So
The
They-
state doesn't do anything for the prison?
we do receive a payment. It's not always regular.
Really?
It's not part of the budget. It's not part of what comes in on state aid. Usually, at some point during the fiscal year, after the budget's all settled, they'll decide if they have some money available. And we do. I think 2 of the 3 years that I've been here, we've received a payment. It was very regular, then it stopped completely, and now it's sort of whenever they decide that they have money.
Can't take them to court?
So the schools, the schools, as somebody mentioned, they do not make a pilot payment. In some communities, they do make a pilot payment, but what they do is, particularly the Middlesex School is very good about funding a capital item. So they funded police equipment. You know, they'll say they have
That's right.
contacted the
They do.
town manager, and the town manager says, you know, they say, we'd like to fund something in public safety. They typically like to do. So I think the bulletproof vests for a year, they
did the
funded.
trash
That's
at
right.
Emerson.
They did the track.
Yeah, so they do make contributions to offset spending.
Does Concord Academy do that?
Not as regularly as Middlesex, from my understanding. So,
Does Fenn, the Fenn school?
not that I'm aware of. They do let recreation use facilities too, and that's not necessarily documented through the budget process or through a financial
Right,
process, but
right.
they do make gyms. A lot of the schools make gyms available and that sort of thing. So free cash. We talk about free cash a lot. This is our undesignated or unassigned fund balance. It's an accumulation, and so anytime we receive revenue that's higher, actual revenue is higher than our estimates, that's generating free cash. We can't spend it. You know, if we say we're going to get $100 million in and we get $101 million, we can't spend that extra million because it wasn't appropriated. And anytime actual expenditures are less than budget, those either or the combination of those 2 things accumulate, and that is what we refer to as free cash. Or in the enterprise funds, we call it retained earnings, like the rest of the world would call it retained earnings.
Right.
Retained taxes.
So it is,
Earnings.
here's the thing
Could it
to,
also be that you just set the tax rate too high? I mean,
Absolutely.
You're
One of the
saying-
2.
well, we,
so it's not really a
We
revenue.
give it back,
It's
right?
not really, we got more revenue than we thought. It's that we estimated our expenses too high, and we set the tax rate too high.
Or property values were, this.
well, no, because we know we go through a process to certify our tax rate every year. We have to have our new growth certified by the state, so we have to know what that is. So we have our budget approved, so we know what our appropriations are, and we have our estimates of revenue, and including property tax, based on certified.
But what's the lag, right? I mean, isn't there a lag between when you're having how we're levying tax versus when they approve, they look at the rate? It's a backward-looking review, right?
Yes, so the appropriations are made in April, and we're certifying the tax rate in November, Thanksgiving, usually before Thanksgiving. So we open July 1 and we're taxing. So the first 2 quarters of the tax bill are based on last year.
Last year, right.
What,
And-
the certification is an audit? What's the certification? Who's the certifying authority?
So the free cash is certified by the state, by the Department of Revenue. So we are submitting our balance sheet to them, and they're certifying that, and they will return to us a letter that says your certified free cash is X. So it is not available, and it's certified as of 7/1 each year. But it's not certified typically until October, November, or December, back to 7/1. So if we have, it's not available. Once June 30 or once July 1 comes around, we have no free cash to appropriate until it's certified. So if we have a special town meeting between July and when it's certified in November,
Right. You can't.
free cash is not a source to be appropriated. No, because then the funding source is property tax.
Oh, yeah,
Right,
that's
so-
right. There's that.
If we have a special town meeting after the property tax rate has been certified in November, you can't add to property tax anymore. So if we have a December or a January, we can't add to the tax bill. You only have the available funds category, and that's, for the most part, it's your stabilization funds and free cash.
I see. So you only have certain levers at certain times of the year.
Yes, yeah.
Can you
Why
explain
the lag?
Use of free cash for appropriation, and
manage
we always
resources
have
at the
these
state
warrant
level.
articles
The government.
that we use,
Come on.
that we
Well, it takes
appropriate
them
$1
time to
million
close the books, I
free
guess.
cash.
I can do that.
For all the
What was the-
Yeah.
So, let me just address this first. Why is there a lag in free cash being certified? Because we have to have our audit completed. The state is not going to look at our balance sheet until it's been audited. So we have our auditors will come in, typically they'll come in and do most of their work at the end of August. And it is late, but there's only so many auditors that do municipal auditing. But there are certain categories of revenues that can be held open until September 30th. So if we have, and these typically have to do with the federal government, and the federal government's on a October 1 fiscal, right? So I think this is why these things are held until the 30th. So the school, for instance, gets a decent amount of grant funding from the federal government. They have expended, they've used their grant, they've put in for their reimbursement.
Right.
But they're not getting their reimbursement till the federal government's fiscal year end. So we will hold that as a receivable. And if we actually receive it, we can close that. If we don't receive it, then it's going to hit our undesignated fund balance. So the state won't even look at our balance sheet until it's been audited. And the auditors really they're not going to finalize it until we cross September 30th.
They want to know what's actually paid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see.
So we get in a situation where we're working with 3 fiscal years at once, and it would be nice if it was done faster than that. So Dee had a question about this chart, right?
Yeah, the use of, yes, that's right.
Right, so this is just a historical view of what we have had available for free cash over the last however many years and what we have used it for. So we have always during this period used some portion of it to offset property taxes, $1 million in the last several years. And that's something that the Finance Committee will say when we look at revenues. Yep, okay, I can check, we're okay with using $1 million or something. And then at various points in time, we've also used free cash for other things. Now, this is in the current budget book, so it's not updated. It was in the draft budget book, not updated for town meeting. So at the April town meeting for fiscal 2020, we also used $500,000 for affordable housing.
Right.
And you can see that, so this is something else that we look
As
at.
appropriated at the town meeting.
So
Yeah.
if I understand this correctly, we have 11.6 or 11.1
Yeah,
sitting in a bank somewhere. And when the middle school construction comes up, 2 to 3 years, maybe that's 12 or 13 million. We could use half of that and plow it in and say we're gonna, if the cost is 50 million, we can use half of that and say we'll pay 6 million and take out a loan for 44, right? That can be done? Through a town meeting and all
you
that.
certainly could do that.
Okay.
You could also say, you would agree to that spread out over
Sure,
a
but
number of
let's
years,
follow it.
which
Yep.
would be a little kinder on our rating, our bond rating probably.
Because our bond rating would go down if we took
Yeah.
So
half
our-
of the free cash flow out?
One of the bond, one of the credit rating factors is, what is your unassigned fund balance? What percent
I
of
see.
that is,
A stabilization fund for debt service would be considered a reserve, right?
yes.
So it doesn't
So we
impact your
just
bond
transfer,
rating.
yeah, okay.
So it's not, it doesn't hurt your bond
Yeah,
rating.
no, but taking it out and paying a bigger
Fine.
down percent
Right, yeah.
hurts it.
Yeah, right.
Even though
Like
it
affordable
might be,
housing.
This is all a scam, because never mind. Because those are, never mind.
I know, they'd
It's
rather
those
that you
same
pay
agencies.
interest.
Sorry?
They'd rather
Yeah,
that you did the
because they're in
stabilization.
cahoots with the banks,
I
and
know.
that's a different story.
Those lobbyists, they probably had something to do. So Carrie, I got a question for you. In 2009, we spent $34,430 on the 375th year celebration. So that must have been in that window after October and before.
It could have been appropriated, does it say, yeah, so that says at
SBA's,
ATM, annual town memeeting,
Oh,
so
so
that
that
was
was it.
appropriated
Oh my
at
God.
annual town meeting.
So at annual town meeting, they were appropriating free cash for operating expenses?
it's only 20,000, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's an operating. Yeah.
yeah, but the finance committee is usually very possessive of free cash.
Oh, but it was during the good old days.
You know what,
Actually, no,
it
wasn't.
probably
It was
likely
during the
came up
recession.
as a late warrant article. It probably was a late warrant
Right.
article.
What we do about it. Probably popped in at the end.
So,
Okay.
so this chart here just shows, as of our last certification, what we had available. We have a financial policy that says that we should have between 5 and 10% of our budget in free cash. If we go over 10%, it says we should expend it on one-time expenditures. We shouldn't be going over 10%. We have,
Historically, we
In-
have quite a lot.
yeah,
I mean, from 2007 to 2017, we were consistently far over 10%.
yeah, and
This
there,
sounds like we're budgeting for free cash, and we're not.
No,
We-
No, yeah,
no, we're not.
So
we
that's.
keep having it though.
so,
We have it, and we say we should be maintaining it 5 to 10% of the general fund budget,
We're not budgeting for
but we're
it.
not budgeting
No,
for
we're
it.
not. We're doing the
No,
math
but we
and we're
do
saying, where
decide
does it
how we
come
want
to?
to spend. We do decide if and when we have.
But we're not budgeting to
We're not
create it,
planning
which is
for
what
it
you're
either.
asking.
We're not, and we're
No,
not.
we are
We're
not
not planning
budgeting
for
to
it.
create
Planning.
it.
Yes.
No, we are
It's
not.
loose change from the sofa.
I understand.
We budget,
In the
we
cushion.
raise the property tax to meet the expenses we project. We don't raise it above that.
And essentially, we're carrying the free cash
Yes.
forward.
Correct. Well,
We-
it's there.
yeah.
Or you could give it back.
We could, but we can't give it back, we could give it back as long as we're within this,
Yeah, well, you could
Level.
give it back down to 5% if you want.
But not too much, because otherwise the credit agencies will get mad.
okay.
Yeah, and so that policy again is best practice for a AAA rated community. That's why we have
5 to 10.
the 5 to 10%.
So this year, what we'll be facing is how much free cash do we want, if any, to use to establish a stabilization fund for the middle school?
Yep.
How much do we want to give back? Because our practice has been to give back every year to offset property tax increases. So I think that's going to be, is that right, Carrie? Do you think that's what we'll be facing this year? As far as what we,
Yeah, so we,
And to tap free cash, we have to go to town meeting for approval.
Tell them, yeah. And-
we do. So we had an article about the million to put back to
Right,
defray the increase for this year. And then we had the 500,000 for the affordable housing. That was a whole separate article.
right.
So yes, we have to ask the town, yes.
The $1 million typically is on the consent agenda.
Yeah,
Because
It's not
you're
really
right.
discussed
Like,
because everybody likes it.
Yeah.
Who's gonna vote against that?
Giving it back. Take it back.
but
Take
it's
it
so,
back.
so for example, and this is just, I'm just thinking about like a Hugh Cargill, right?
Yep.
Where, they always seem to be wanting more, right? Is there a process for those funds that's, could they turn to free cash to
Hugh
supplement?
Cargill is a trust fund.
Right,
Yeah.
but their draw is limited, right? Somebody sets a limit on what they can draw out of the trust.
So the
on-
trustees,
Spending.
we have the trustees of town donations. It's a separate board. And they oversee the trust funds. They've actually done a lot of work on their distribution policy, and,
Yeah.
and the Hugh Cargill Fund will be much happier with what this new board of trustees has come up with. Yeah.
What is this trust for?
So there, we have
Endowment.
40 separate trust funds where people have made donations to the trustees for specific purposes.
Does the town manage that, or is that managed privately?
Well, it's under the umbrella of the town. It's managed by the trustees of town donations. I'm their treasurer, so I, work with them. They have an investment advisor as well.
You said they always want more? The
Well,
trust
they-
Spend more.
They want to spend more because the demands are there.
They have an endowment spending policy, right? Like,
What do
Yeah.
they use the money for?
For
whatever
the Hugh,
the endowment says it can be.
yeah,
services.
Hugh Cargill in particular is for residents in need.
Oh, I
So a
see.
lot
Oh, I
is,
see. So they're asking the difference to the town for pay for the difference.
they have,
They haven't.
no, they
They haven't.
haven't,
Yeah.
no.
They're concerned about, this is,
Oh.
it's a tangent, but they were concerned that the folks that manage the trust were not giving, were not generous enough to meet the needs of the requests
I see.
on a given
Yeah.
basis.
I see.
Their hands are kind of tied because the money sits in a trust.
Yeah,
I see.
Right. It's like thinking about what you could use free cash for.
yeah, I
What's that
see,
side of it?
I see.
So where are we moving next? Here's what the non-guidelines looks like. I did mention what each of these categories are before. Not sure what else to say about
That's okay.
this. Health
So
insurance.
just overall bottom line, what percentage of the total actual spending in a given year?
So the
Or is it like 40% that's non-guidelines, or is it 60
no,
or
it's
70?
for well, this was fiscal 18, 17.26%.
Although it's right here, oh, okay, good, thanks, okay, yep. Non-guidelines.
Non-guideline.
Yeah.
So guidelines big.
So we have the guidelines apply to 80%? Wow, I thought it was the other way around. Why aren't salaries part of the non-guidelines?
Ah,
Sorry?
nothing. Go ahead.
Well, I mean,
Go ahead, take your
technically, you
case.
can't like fire the whole staff. So it's kind of mandatory to keep, is that a stupid question?
No, it's not a stupid question, but I think keeping it within guideline helps to keep the collective, gives some guidance to the collective bargaining so that the increases are reasonable.
I agree there. I guess what I'm thinking is, when you come up with the non-guideline spend or forecast for next year,
Yeah.
some of this stuff is just, you know how much liability insurance is gonna go up because they gave you an estimate. You could put in the salaries in here and then just zero out the rate increase, right? And so the base gets built in, and then whatever above and beyond that you wanna give is subject to the guidelines?
Well, I think, programs and priorities change too. You may be adding something or taking something away, so it's not constant.
You're right. When we went to go look at the guidelines, that's where we started. What are you committed to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're committed to a big number. 80% of that number is already committed. So there's very small discretionary that you actually have to play with. And then you have, of that committed piece, how much of it is payroll, and the majority of it is payroll.
And it's even smaller.
The math becomes pretty easy pretty quickly to tell you where are they going to come in, because you know what they have to spend.
Yeah.
You know, you can project what they're going to come in for salary increases. And then that number, then we do the math and we say, and that's a 5% bump on taxes, and that's too much. And that's where the discussions begin. But you're right, the math is, there's not that much
I think in
stuff
general,
wiggling
the Finance
around.
Committee wants to move to bring more things under the guideline process as opposed to less things under the guideline process. So putting in a fixed salary number here as non-guideline kind of makes it feel like, oh, that's inflexible.
Yeah,
It's just a
no,
given
that's
number.
really fair.
You know what I mean?
That's
There's
fair.
no flex in there.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
So,
But as an intellectual exercise, it's a valuable one.
Yes.
Well, the reason, I agree with you, right? But then on the other hand, you say, you know what? Well, let's be realistic. You're not going to get rid of the staff. And so what you really have
Well, why?
is,
Why not?
well, just hold that thought for a minute, right? Because I think 500,000 is what you got. You can give all of it to wage increases and have no program money left, or you could do that.
right.
That's
But
right.
the staff should be part of the equation. I guess my only question is, have we really laid people off in the history of town
If you
government?
excise certain portions of where you had people taking care of the budget, what if you took all the accounting and excised?
That's why
Have
the
we done it?
FinCom was so committed to zero-based budgeting,
Yeah.
because that's where you get at it. You go in and you say, start
Yeah,
from
I
zero,
agree.
don't give me the
And then-
3% on
And then you would
top.
actually take,
Right.
yeah.
And you have attrition. You don't have layoffs, but you have attrition.
Well, let me ask one other question along this line. To make this smaller,
Yeah.
the payroll tax here assumes that the people are gonna be employed anyway next year, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So if you got rid of the people, the payroll tax would drop too.
Right.
Yeah.
And so would
So why is it,
health
why isn't all
insurance.
that then considered discretionary?
I agree.
That's
So
a
that was
good
a discussion we had last.
So I,
No, we didn't.
That's what we were
Now
trying to
you've
get
skipped the
at.
two.
That's what, actually, we were trying to get at that a few
Okay,
minutes
so
ago.
then
and
why not?
It landed like a lead balloon.
so I think, I think
On the one
the,
hand, it's mandatory if you walk in with the assumption that you're not, that the people are fixed. But if the assumption rightly is zero-based budgeting and the people shouldn't be fixed, then those dollars should be.
The only
think
people who
Christina's
did
right.
zero base was the schools. That's the
I
town.
think we get at what you're getting at with the
But you're right.
zero-based budget.
You're right.
this is the town and CPS,
The town, right. Right.
and CPS.
On CPS. That's
And so I think probably the thought process in having like payroll taxes and even health insurance and everything is, that's for the town and CPS. It's not, the payroll taxes, that line is for what we're paying for town and CPS. Health insurance, that's for town and CPS. So they're shared between the two budgeting entities, so I think that's another reason why they're
least for
in this
retired.
But the
category.
formula is tied
No.
directly to
A number of people.
the number of people.
No, it's social security
They're all
tax.
So it's
Right.
rather be in one bucket or the other bucket.
I agree.
Well, one of the things we asked for in
That's
the
the
guideline
conversation we
letter
had
this
last
year is we asked for headcount numbers and we asked for the fully loaded
Yes,
costs.
that will help.
Okay, that's one baby
Yes,
step
that's one
towards
step.
understanding that
So then we
a
have
$100,000
to-
salary
Cleaner
is $130,000.
conversation.
So
But-
if you're doing that, then this whole line item would come out, right?
No, that was only for changes to headcount.
On this sheet, on that sheet, it's only for changes?
No, what I asked for in the guideline letter.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
All right, sorry to derail
it's okay,
us.
it's interesting.
So which, are there any other categories here other than the payroll tax that could be impacted by changes in?
In head count?
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, the insurance.
Almost all of
Yeah.
them.
Right.
The biggest pieces.
Other than property and liability insurance,
That's the
down to
point.
the first 5 or 6 items
The
are all
group,
employment related.
maybe not the OPEB, but definitely.
Yeah, OPEB too,
Well,
absolutely.
is that the trust fund? Is that the
No,
makeup,
that's
or
what
is
they,
that
that's
the
what they
benefits?
negotiated to pay for retiree healthcare. That's what it
There's a
is.
makeup. There's a
It's-
makeup
it's
component to
benefits.
that, or
It's a
not?
benefit.
Yeah, it's the annual required contribution
Yeah.
to pay the unfunded
To pay the
liability and the current
But it's the
unfunded.
liability.
benefit that's
It's
been
all in one
negotiated.
line.
Yeah.
Okay, so part of that is.
Charge.
Yep.
It's
Payroll.
it is negotiated, but town meeting adopted the statute allowing for retiree health insurance.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah.
But it's variable with the number of
Yeah.
employees, right?
A lot of the
Yes,
towns did that.
yeah.
All right.
So these non-guideline expenditures will vary depending on headcount.
They will.
Yes.
Okay, and we have the headcount as of October 1?
Well, and so the difficulty is these numbers get projected first, absent the whole budgeting process. And so that it does make it difficult. They're obviously estimates based on
Current
what,
staffing levels.
yeah, current staffing levels with a little bit of extra built in.
Do you modify those then after we have the other information?
I have not, because I've felt that there was enough in there
Justification for
to
this,
cover
okay.
what we had. I mean, if there was a proposal to add 30 staff, that would be tough. But with health insurance in particular, the town is, the employer contribution to health insurance is not as high as it is for other towns. So we have a much lower participation rate. And so it's not, that number is, we have two-thirds of, I want to say two-thirds of town employees and maybe only about 60% of school employees are taking health insurance. So it's not a given that it's a one-for-one. But again, if there was a huge headcount increase,
Yeah.
that would be something to talk about.
Okay.
Oh. Wow.
So health insurance, we are required by law to offer health insurance to anybody who works 20 or more hours a week regularly, which is different. The federal law is 30. We did introduce a high deductible health plan this past year with a significant interest in enrollment in that. We purchased our health insurance from the Minuteman Neshoba Health Group, which is a consortium of about 20 public employers, and we by far have the highest enrollment in the high deductible plan because we're in with some employers that are still contributing 75% or to their health insurance. So there was a much bigger incentive for our employees to go into the high deductible plan, and we're getting really good feedback from that. So that is good on all ends. We went through OPEB before, retirement. We do have our own retirement system. The members of the retirement system include, in addition to the town, the regional district, and the housing authority. The retirement benefit by law is available or really mandated for any employee working 25 hours per week or more. It is a defined benefit plan. The benefit is determined by age and years of service. There are 4 different groups of employees in retirement plans in Massachusetts. In Concord, we have members in Group 1 and Group 4. Group 4 is public safety employees. Group 1 is everybody else. The teachers are not in the retirement system. They not in the town's retirement system. They're in the Mass Teachers retirement system. But paraprofessionals that work at the school, administrative, non-teaching administrative staff, they're part of the town's retirement system. So there's no set employer contribution to the plan, and on an actuarial basis, employees who were hired after 1996, it's not 110, it's 100.01. So Group 1 employees typically are fully funding their pension benefit. Group 4 employees are funding about 50%. And the difference is the retirement age. Group 4, public safety, they can go out at age 55. And if they started, in there when they were young, they could max out their benefit by 55. They're also mandated to retire by 65 if they're still working.
Who makes up the difference?
So that's what the town's retirement assessment is, the difference between the estimated cost of benefits that are being paid out in
That's
1
the
year.
match in essence.
Yeah, so it's not like
Match, but yeah,
the employer contributes 5% or something, but it is the difference.
we're
So
making it up.
it's the difference between what's going to be paid out and what's available, and also the expenses of the retirement system. So the retirement system has about a $200,000 budget annually, so that is also part of the assessment.
What's the total balance? Oh,
The-
okay, it's 167.
Yeah.
That's okay.
And so the chart here shows what the contribution rate is based on date of hire. So for most of our employees, they are contributing 9% of their salary, and anybody making more than 30% contributes an extra 2% on the amount above 30%.
Public safety, is that police and fire?
Police and fire, yeah. So here are the latest statistics.
Is that voluntary? Are we,
It's not, once you're at 25 or more hours, you are
oh, it's
mandated to participate. It would be nice if it was voluntary, because we are, now with the new workforce, we're seeing people that maybe want to come and work in the public sector for a while, or they're not differentiating between private and public. We have a lot of engineers on staff that can easily go back and forth between private and public sector, and, not real thrilled with paying 9 plus 2% into pension. And you have to be here for 10 years to vest. And, maybe they're not going to be here for 10 years. And you get to take your money out. But the retirement system, the interest rate that it gives you for what you put in is about 0.001, right? So it's a great benefit if you're going to stay.
around, yeah.
But if you're just going to stay for a short time, you can take it out. You can put it into another plan, but you're not going to be credited with
Are you guys thinking of
interest.
changing the plan as a result?
There's-
It's not incentive?
It's mandated by state law, so the state would have to change, but I do think it would be something for the state to look at. I think people should be able to decide
Yeah.
what they would
More
like to
affordable.
do.
Yeah.
What about, in our town, the rate of retirement? Do we have a lot of, is there going to be a silver
Do we have a lot of
tsunami
old
here?
people? We have a lot of old people. We do. The largest percentage of employees is, it's very close between 50 and 55 and 55 and 60. So we do have a lot of people who are getting ready to retire. So the retirement system is, on a closed loop funding schedule, fully funded by 2029. We're at, in the mid-80s. We value this as of 1/1, and I'm sure if you follow the markets, you know what happened in 12-18. So our market value was down about 12%, $12 million just in time for this valuation. So we had been over 90, and the town had been over 90 before. At this point, you know, we're not saying we're fully funded, but
You're very
you know,
good.
we're pretty close there. Yeah.
OPEB is the thing that's.
My hope is that, you know, as we get closer to fully funded with retirement, maybe our assessment is going to come down and we could put that into OPEB. And then any health insurance savings that we see because of migration to these less costly plans. The problem is when you have a third of your employees that are eligible that aren't in, as they become more attractive, then there's a balancing act there. But yes, we would like to divert to OPEB whenever possible. Debt service, I don't know, have we beaten debt service to death? Tax-supported debt service as of June 30 last year, we haven't updated for this year yet, 42.8 million, $2,424 per capita. I mentioned most of our debt is financed for a maximum of 10 years, except for the school buildings. We pay 60% over 5 years, 90% over 10. These charts don't include the district's debt. This is just what is on the books for the town.
What's total AV?
Oh, assessed value.
Assessed
So that's a percent of assessed value. Here's the dollar value, so the total debt service payments that we would pay based on existing schedules and projected new non-exempt debt, funding that 5-year debt plan. This is what our debt would look like. So, you know, talking about when can we add something big, not for a while, without seeing. Huh?
2029.
You see, you want to be out a little further than where we're probably going to be.
Yeah,
That was the problem that we saw with the school.
It's not gonna,
Can you go back
So-
one second?
it's
Sure.
not gonna wait till 2029.
So,
No, you can't wait.
It's not gonna wait.
so the enterprise debt, that's covered through
user fees.
user
Yeah.
fees.
That's the life
So we can
plans.
kind of lop that off the top.
But again, this is town and CPS. It's not the district.
Right,
And it's not Minuteman. It's not that.
right.
You don't have that other chart that.
The mountain of
Yeah,
debt?
the mountain of
The
debt.
I have the mountain of debt.
Okay.
I don't have it in this
Okay.
presentation, but
That's the scary
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
do you want to look at the mountain of debt?
Yeah, let's look at the mountain of debt.
Go ahead, let's look at the mountain of debt.
Let's see how easily this opens.
Enterprise exempt.
So we have a high school, or we have a middle school, we have projects from the town, 3 different
Oh,
long-term capital plan projects.
What are they? What are the town ones? The municipal?
The town ones?
Yep,
Well, we have the middle school,
yep, right,
but then we have
the municipal.
Kai's Road, municipal.
Yep. The
Um,
police station, the safety, the police?
Yeah,
Yep.
safety.
Yep.
And there should be one more.
I thought so too.
so what, I'm sorry,
We're looking at the ideas of the town long-term capital plan projects.
public safety, public works, and municipal.
Is it Public Works?
And the municipal,
Yeah.
and public
Public
works.
Works.
I don't know why it's on my computer, but it's only showing page 1, and it's not letting me advance. So, no mountain of debt.
Oh, maybe that's
Sorry, it might be a sign.
You like where your office is, don't you?
I think I'm pretty saturated at this point.
Yeah, let's just keep
Yeah.
going.
But when you said municipal, is that the Kai's Road? Or is that also public?
No,
works?
Kai's Road is public works.
So is this municipal?
Yes, this and 141 Kai's Road planning.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I think my computer's broken.
It's okay.
It's okay, we're getting
Turn 'em
maxed
on.
out, Carrie.
Yeah,
We've climbed the mountain and are on the other side.
But you know, having that mountain of debt thing would be helpful when we're setting the guideline. It's come the mountain of debt slide. We should probably have a more sophisticated name.
Oh, good, okay.
The projected debt slide that showed the.
You know, I can if somebody's gonna say what those numbers are,
Which
right?
numbers?
If, to project the big capital,
Yeah.
you know, what they are.
Yeah,
Is it
someone has to
90?
tell you what they're gonna
Right, is it
She
90?
made guesses last year of what they might,
Well,
they never
it's
told us
90
the
million
numbers.
for the middle school.
Yeah, the other ones we didn't really know.
No, and I mean, as soon as I put those
Aren't
numbers
they-
out, it
aren't
was, no,
they-
those aren't the right numbers.
Yeah.
Those are
Carrie,
too
aren't
low.
they presenting the results of the capital plan study
Yeah,
to the
soon.
select board next Monday?
At the end of August, but those, I think that's August 26th, the municipal facilities study.
Yes.
So that includes
Oh.
all those
Yes.
things.
What?
I don't know.
My understanding is it has a bunch of different options, and that they will be priced out, but I have not seen what
Okay,
those costs are.
But that would be your best
That would be a
source
good basis.
for numbers.
Right, when it's available. I mean, this is something that we were gonna have in February,
Yeah.
so I,
But the timing would be fine as far as using that to give us an updated projection of debt service when we set our preliminary guideline.
yeah, it's just, my understanding is that there are multiple, 3 or 4 options for each of those 3 things. And so
Oh, so
There's-
it's a
Won't be a
big
single
range.
there's
number.
just, you know,
Big range, right.
we can model anything as long as you tell me what we're modeling. Yeah. So this is our snapshot of our 5-year plan. We're spending anywhere between, or authorizing between $3 and $5 or $3 and $6 million annually. And these are the projects. We're just approving a year at a time, even though we're showing 5 years. We're just approving a year at a time at town meeting. These are the town projects. And then at the top, the school projects. And you can see there's nothing in the plan for the middle school feasibility study, because when this plan was approved in November, that was a twinkle in the eye, right? If it was, and then you can see at the bottom, you know, the financing subject to debt exclusion ballot. Those are actually even lower than the numbers I ended up modeling in December or January, whenever I did that. The one thing that I want to mention, because people have asked about this plan is the town manager's capital plan.
Yeah.
Under the charter, the town manager puts it together. Town manager asks the school to submit their capital plan, and they do, but the town manager allocates what he sees fit in this $3 to $6 million range each year. So you can see up until, well, really through fiscal 2020, it's working fine. What has been allocated is what the school has asked for their smaller capital. But beginning in 2021, they have a series of green initiatives that they would like to implement that are not really contemplated in the town manager's plan. So we'll see how that shakes out when we
Pink line,
start.
The unfunded? Is that
No,
what
no,
that is?
the green,
Oh, the green one.
yeah, and right, so the pink is the unfunded. The difference between what is currently set aside in the town manager's capital plan versus what the request
Do these have a
was.
payback? Do you know if they have a payback? These are, you said green energy
I
saving
would
initiatives?
assume so. We haven't received any detail on that, but that certainly would be taken into the equation, that if
Is that new? Did we have that last year?
this came on in November for the first time, yeah.
So if I were to read this correctly, for fiscal year 21,
Yeah,
they've added 550,000 for the green funds, but the unfunded is 655, so even without it, they'd be short 155? Is that the way to read that?
so they're looking for,
I don't know if that's full.
They're looking for 1.555.
okay, that's town meeting 20, so in 2022, They're looking, right,
and you show an unfunded of 655.
right.
So if you just take away the green, they're still short 150. That's
Yeah.
the way to look at
Yeah.
that? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And so I have been asked, why so little for the schools? And when I talked to the former town manager, it was, the school buildings were much newer than the town buildings. And so there was more emphasis on, more need for replacement and repair at the older buildings.
Not to dwell too, but why does Alcott have almost $500,000 employment?
So that's what the school submitted, and,
So they know something is gonna go on that year. They need
yeah, I'm,
$475,000 for.
Yeah.
did. They
I
had-
mean,
they
they
had-
had
yeah,
a
right,
plan.
something must need to be
Yeah,
replaced.
so it's a
Yeah.
puzzle.
Yeah,
No, that's good. You know what? I'd like to see that, right? It's-
Yeah, no, we can ask him.
yeah.
Yeah.
So can you, did we vote on this?
Yeah, no, that's
I mean-
exactly right.
No.
They've planned it.
No, you only vote 1 year at a time.
So what did we vote on this past year?
You voted on the
2020 or the 20?
Four-
the
4.8.
FY 2020 town meeting year 2019,
Which starts, the
which started, yeah.
So next year, they're looking at the 60 million.
Well,
No,
No,
it's a placeholder.
yeah,
It's not,
It's a big one.
it is. That's why we wanted to start talking about it.
yeah.
Exactly right, Dee.
What, the million?
The 60, the green in the middle.
Right,
the
so
stuff
there's-
that's maybe coming down the road.
And it was just plugged into it somewhere, just because it's, it needs to be, it needs some visibility, but there's no details behind it until that report comes out at the end of this month.
Mm.
So we did go through this already, our debt policy, the 7 to 8%. And then here is the expenditures for the guidelines, just what it looks like. Enterprise budgets, we've talked about this. There are business type operations supported by user fees. Enterprise funds are under the direction of the town manager. They are presented to you at public hearings in February. Those budgets are not available much before that, and there's, less, you certainly have less discussion
Yeah, less
about
involved.
those.
Really
Yeah.
don't draw on property tax.
Yeah.
The other place that you see something like this, although they're not really enterprises, is the high school has those sports
Just special revenue accounts.
special revenue. Yeah, they collect funds from parking, they collect funds for sports and for trips. So they also have this other revenue and expense type categories.
At the district
the
So
district
if we were, if the town was to build another wastewater treatment facility in West Concord, for example, would all that funding come out of enterprise? Where would that come from?
So that's an interesting question, because some of the capital outlay, the way that I have understood it, the capital outlay for the enterprise funds historically had been supported through general fund debt, and the operation and upkeep had been supported through the enterprise debt. Now, we haven't, put in water, done water extensions or sewer extensions in a long time, but there has been some general fund support. And I think that would be a discussion, how that would be
Yeah.
split going forward.
Yeah,
That's been, it's been discussed.
yeah.
So that,
Because that's one of the things that limits growth. So we're at capacity, right, in terms of our sewer capacity. So if we want to grow the housing that's not on private septic or commercial property that's not on private septic, the only way to do that at some point is to put in a new facility, or to expand an existing facility, or to get some kind of regulatory reform that allows us to discharge more. So that's just the way it is. But where would the money come from if we wanted to do that?
Yeah, so I was thinking, when you said that, I was thinking about NAGOG
Yeah.
too. And the NAGOG project is an enterprise. That's
Yeah.
plugged into the enterprise. But
They
that's,
have
obviously,
been
that's
collecting
water, not
taxes.
sewer.
They have been, through the taxes or what you're paying.
User fees.
User fees.
Yeah.
That has been going into that fund for the work on the filtration plants.
There are these fees. Are they actually held separately, or are they part of, it's like the sewer improvement fee, where does that go? Is that held in a separate bucket?
Well, on an accounting basis,
Yeah.
it's a separate fund, not necessarily in a separate bank account.
But it's held as a separate fund, potentially to be used for capital expansion?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And
What is
maintenance,
Junctions
because they
asking
have like 5 million in maintenance they
That's
want
a
to do
good
on the
question.
sewer lines. Where's that gonna get funded from?
So those projects are within the enterprise funds.
Yeah, okay.
It's just, historically, there are some projects that have been split, and I don't necessarily know exactly why, because these are, things that have happened over time.
Is there a possibility that Junction Village would somehow trigger the need for a new wastewater treatment facility in West Concord?
I
That's a good question.
Don't know.
83 units.
That's a really good question.
I assume they would plan that out.
Well, that's,
You know that already,
I don't know.
What about all the, like the Baker Avenue? Is that connected to a treatment plant?
I don't know.
Might be on private, I don't know.
All right, next slide.
It's scary.
All right, so then, any other warrant articles, which I mentioned 3 or 4 times, anything that has a financial impact would also come in front of you. I think we're getting close to the end. My screen is not showing the same thing as up here. Finance Committee report, we did talk about that. There are lots of different components, some even mandated by town meeting action.
Wow.
Some of the other financial things that you hear about, but they don't necessarily come in front of you. Financial policies. We had a kind of a big discussion a couple of years ago. The town had put together a new set of financial policies when the former finance director retired. This was something that he wanted to do, to codify all of those. And there was a discussion about, did the Finance Committee approve the policies? Who approved the policies? And the policies were approved by the Chief Executive Officer, which is the town manager. And I don't know if they were presented up front to the Finance Committee. I know at the Select Board level they had been, but I was never clear if they came to the Finance Committee. But they're policies that have been, drafted based upon best practices for AAA rated communities. The bond rating, you had a great presentation a few weeks ago, so you understand how that works. The audit, we are audited by an independent auditor on an annual basis. We have a separate financial audit advisory committee that reviews the audit in great detail. Probably has 2 or 3 meetings a year per audit. And they look at the town's audit, they look at the district's audit, which is nice because the district wouldn't necessarily need to allow us to do that, but they've agreed to do that. And then the light plant has its own audit. The light plant is the only department in town that operates on a calendar year, and that's a federal requirement, so they do their own audit as well. So they're in, in our books and in their books as well. The town accountant, I just want to mention, so we have one of the divisions in the Department of Finance is accounting, and the head of that division is the town accountant. The town accountant is appointed by the Select Board and directly responsible to the Select Board for making sure that the town manager and me, that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. So even though she's part of the finance department, I work with her on a regular basis. She has a separate reporting, not to the town manager or to the chief financial officer, but to the Select Board.
Who is that person?
Mary Barrett. She's a super competent employee. It's not easy to find anybody that wants to work in municipal accounting because I think we do everything backwards from what people are used to. I think, you know, what she tells me, we do a lot of fund accounting, and that's not what's done in the private sector so much. But she's been with the town about 6 years. She's really top notch. So some other consideration: the open meetings law, the public records law, conflict of interest. The town does sponsor a committee and board volunteer effective governance workshop. It's typically on a Saturday, I think in September, maybe it's in October. We don't have a date yet established for this year. That is usually done with the chair of the select board and the town clerk. Very good session to learn more about each of these different topics. The main thing that you need to know really is the open meetings law, that you really, and the open meetings law says that a quorum of a committee shouldn't be discussing committee business outside of a publicly posted committee meeting. You are a committee of 15. So that really doesn't mean or anticipate that 7 of you would get together and talk about town business. I think the safest thing is really not to talk to your committee members about committee business outside of a committee meeting, either directly or in emails. So a lot of times we'll send something out and say, please just respond to me, or just respond to the chair of the committee. That's so you don't violate the open meetings law. That's so it's not, you know, I'm putting out a poll, can you make a meeting on August 7th? If you respond to all, nothing's going to happen. But if for some reason it was a question that was going to come before the board, or, you know, maybe it was, is it time to put this on the agenda? And Dean sends that out to each of you, and you start responding to all, then you can sort of get a sense of where the committee is going outside of the meeting. That's called serial deliberations, and that's something you need to steer clear of. But don't, I had an email from a member who said it'd be great if there was a finance committee mentor. You know, if the new members could be appointed a mentor without violating the open meetings law. You're not going to violate the open meetings law, Dee, if you ask Mary something. You know, if it's one on, if it's, and you certainly can be in touch with me as well. So you don't feel like you can't talk to people, but you really need to not be talking about committee business outside of a meeting.
Yeah. I mean,
Well, it's based on the number of members.
I mean, this is all about understanding process. And I think there are going to be questions about process, which is kind of what you deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Really more about policy and direction, right? And there's a lot of process here. I'm very appreciative for this training because it just gives me an appreciation for what's in your head. It's pretty incredible.
The open meetings law is really, it's a tough one, and I think it's counterintuitive to people. I had a finance committee member say, how am I supposed to decide how I'm going to vote on anything if I can't talk to people? I got to do it all in a public meeting, and here every single meeting is on TV, and it's sort of intimidating. So it is a bit counterintuitive, but the easiest thing is just not to discuss committee business. But it's based on the quorum. So 15, 8 is your quorum. The select board, they're 5, 3 is their quorum. So you may be, Andrea just said, I thought it was 2. Maybe you've heard the select board say 2, because they, at 2, they're running into, just talking to each other, they're running into an issue. Here, you're much bigger. So it's not a violation of the law, but you have to be mindful of the process and what the public might think.
Members talking, and that would be okay?
Under the strict interpretation of the law.
Just bump it up against.
Right.
So what if it's a subcommittee?
A subcommittee is still, it's still a quorum of the subcommittee.
Of the subcommittee.
It used to be, before the most recent set of AG interpretations. Subcommittees, you could get away with it if you had a subcommittee, and you'd see committees appointing a subcommittee, and then it didn't need to be a public meeting. That has changed. So subcommittees are considered committees, and the quorum issue applies. This meeting, not necessarily a public meeting, because I called this meeting, and you're here at my training session. If the town manager's got a decision he needs to make on health insurance, and he wants to bring in a couple people from here, a couple people from the select board, it's not a public meeting because it's a decision under his jurisdiction, and he's not, as an individual, not subject to the open meetings law. Yeah, so that doesn't happen too often, but, you know.
So you are not subject to the.
I'm not subject. I'm subject to a lot of things, but not the open meetings law as an individual. Yep. So that's it.
I want to say one thing. Thank you for this. Very good.
You're welcome.
I don't know anybody else who's attended, but I know Dee and I went to the DLS for new members financial. I don't know if that's an annual thing they do or semi-annual.
It's annual.
But it was a
That one
great
is annual.
Yeah.
introduction into cherry sheets, the levy limit. They did calculations. It was, what, 6 hours I think it was back?
It was all day.
Well, I know we got back at 3, so, but it was a great introduction to sort of like how a town runs, and not our charters and stuff specifically, but how you calculate the levy limit, how you roll that over to the next year. So,
Oh, good.
yeah, it was, I found it useful.
I thought one of the best things was a different understanding about debt and the impact of debt, but also as debt goes down, but you have the ability to keep raising with regards to Proposition 2.5, raising the budget. And the comment that was made was, if your debt's going down, but you see this incline, it's being filled in. So that gap gets filled in by personnel, et cetera, other costs.
Yeah.
Which I just, it was like, when you think about your own personal, you want personal debt to go down, right? You're
Right,
not gonna be-
right.
Yeah. And you hold the other things, even or kind of.
So I
So
know
But that's not, it was really interesting.
DLS, Labor and Services ran it. They did one out of Holy Cross. I know they did one. There was one coming in Sherborne, but that may have passed.
Oh, there's one
Yeah,
supposedly in January sometime.
So I don't know if you have. I assume you might have.
They do a couple. You went to the new finance officials.
Yeah.
Yes.
They do once a year. Then they do something else at Holy Cross, which is very similar but a much shorter.
We went to Holy Cross.
You went to Holy Cross?
Holy Cross, yeah.
Okay, so
It was,
they
I have it right here. It was the DLS
new finance officials.
New finance forum. Yeah.
When was that? What
Yeah.
time? What month?
Your visibility into that, or, because I missed that one. Yeah.
It was the first meeting after town.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're
She sent it to us.
And they had a lot of
May 1st
treasurers
as well.
and,
Yeah.
who's the other person?
the assessors. You usually go to that
The
one.
assessors,
Yeah.
treasurers,
So there's
a lot of
probably
finance committee members too.
there's two or three different things, very similar,
Right.
different durations of time. There's one the end of September, beginning of October.
Well, we went to the municipal,
Yeah, that one was a way different than.
yeah.
than what I'm-
That had value in terms of kind of state process but
Yeah, it wasn't too much, like, it didn't mention any, like, details how anything's run, it's
No.
more what's coming up down the budget.
right, that's a whole other thing, yeah.
So anyway, it's just, and Kerry signed us up for that too, so. it was
So that's only once a year?
That one is once a year, but there are different opportunities that are for shorter duration, because that one is.
Local services.
Division of Local Services, DLS. And these are the people who actually work just with towns and,
They're the ones who do the audit on the reserve,
towns and
right?
cities.
They provide a lot of oversight, a lot of oversight.
Thank you. This
Thank
is
you so
very
much,
good.
that was really
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Carrie. Really.
overwhelming.
Give you a round of applause.
Bye.
I'm impressed.
on the tape.
All right.